Hi guys, back into it. Yeah, I was just getting a coffee. I just ready. So yeah, yawning, trying to wake up. Some wake up juice. Yeah, fucking hell. I just forgot to because normally I turn my alarm clock off. Better put these on because Jared will be appearing at some stage. Yeah, so I usually disable it and leave for a later time, but you know, but I didn't actually disable it, and so I actually ended up because I would have actually, as a consequence, I would have missed the Bart's live stream, and wouldn't have been part of it. But because I forgot to actually disable the time alarm, I ended up waking up earlier, so only doing 5 hours sleep, and so yeah. Hello, I'll put that up first. Yep. And so you've sent me a message of some sort. Yes, you can. Just send it to you, Luke. Okay, Daniel, I just used Bluetooth headphones and do my usual stuff, training, etc., while listening and chatting, etc. Yeah, well, it doesn't have as much EMF as other things, so it's less of an issue in that regard. What the fuck? I searched Harry Serpanos and his channel didn't come up. Really? Oh, shit. Oh, the P's in front of the R, the other way around. Serpanos. Yep. Too long. Neck hurts. Get out of bed. Let's just jump through some of this sort of stuff. I'll just go really quickly through it. Hey, I'm not into the gun slinging sort of stuff. That's Jared's thing, you know. He does the illegal stuff. Yeah, I'm not Sicilian. God, everybody's having a rough time. Nope. SER. Somebody got it right. And we get down to here. Actually, Luke's in the stream. I'll just bring him up.
Well,
G'day, mate.
Hello, Harry. And hello, everyone. Well, this is kind of nerve-wracking.
Good to hear from you.
Good to be here.
Yes, a bit of a different experience for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how are things in Brazil at the moment?
No, there's no sign of things getting back to normal, at least for me. Some businesses have been lifting some restrictions, but university and stuff, there's basically no shadow.
It's a bit like here in Australia as well. We're sort of going through these different stages where they're opening up a few things now, which is good because I'll be able to go and get a haircut because I haven't had a haircut for a while. So
I actually had the guy that cuts my hair. He's actually doing a home service, so he's going into everyone's homes and just cutting their hair. But it's
spreading the virus.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yes. Look, it's sort of a crazy like that, but our restrictions are sort of starting to come down. Our international ones won't come down for a very long time, unfortunately. I won't be able to go overseas. So that's probably the only annoyance thing. I'm talking with some of my mates. We may end up in Queensland. It's quite warm up there and get a bit of vitamin D out in the sun and on the beach. Because it's very tropical up north, the northern part of Australia. But where I'm in the south, it's the complete opposite. It's very cold. It's like parts of northern Europe. So yeah.
Well, I wouldn't fare well with that kind of weather. Not
Look, this is where my family is, work. My father's down here, so it's sort of much harder to basically just take off in that regard. But long term, I want to actually sort of retire in the tropics. Bali is my plan at this stage, but I don't know whether it'll be a different plan in the future. So we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. You just mentioned the tropical areas and stuff. I'm not really sure about northern Brazil, but I have a friend over there that I mostly talk the internet and stuff. He said there are some cases, but it really seems that the fact that it's such a hot weather and there's so much sun over there, it's really keeping the virus at bay.
Precisely. Yeah. I mean, people are still going to get the virus, and how susceptible you are, how bad you get it will depend also on, other underlying health conditions. In that regard, if you've got a weak immune system, you can have all the vitamin D in the world, but if you've got a weak immune system because of a whole lot of other health issues, it's not going to help as much. But you're not going to get it's going to be of much lower prevalence, and it depends because some societies, like a lot of the Southeast Asian societies, tend to, because of cultural or religious reasons, tend to cover more. So they can also be, if they stay indoors quite a bit, they can also be suboptimal in vitamin D, even though they live in the tropics. I know it's bizarre, but they actually, especially in Indonesia, I know they actually sell vitamin D supplements.
Wow.
How weird is that? But that's because basically a lot of them, due to Muslim faith and whatever else, they cover, and they basically don't get a lot of sun exposure. So they're in the tropics and they still have suboptimal vitamin D levels. So it sort of varies within the population.
Well, that's really unexpected. Oh, by the way, thanks for everyone cheering me on the chat.
Yeah, keep it up, guys. So I'll just flow through a few of these. So what's on my menu today? on nerve inflammation. Nerve inflammation, yeah. Specifically,
Nerve
sort of.
inflammation.
I mean, if you've any sort of inflammation, tends to be because look, a lot of nerve inflammation tends to be issues of myelination. So, are you getting enough cholesterol in your diet? Are you getting enough good nutrients that you need? So those are the sort of questions you need to ask yourself. But then again, it could be viral. Viral things can actually cause sort of inflammation of the nervous system. So it's hard to say what could be causing it in that regard. My mother had a sort of, when she was alive, she had a viral thing that actually caused her in the soft tissue, actually like an arthritic pain in the soft tissue. So it wasn't basically in the bones or anything, but in the soft tissue. So it's a very unusual, very rare type. But yeah, there are all sorts of different things that you can actually end up getting, no matter what diet you're on. So yeah, unless I knew more about, whether you've tested and stuff like that, it's hard to say, mate.
Harry, since Samsung brought nerve inflammation up, I was talking to a friend about this, but it seems that the conventional explanation for multiple sclerosis, the doctors say it has something to do with a viral infection, but that doesn't seem really likely.
I don't think it. Look, there may be what we call. Remember, it's like cancer. What we call multiple sclerosis and all that, a big family of potential things. So it may not be one disease. It may be, in some cases, some people are getting certain damage to their nervous system due to they've got a genetic weakness, which means that a certain pathway can actually be utilized by some sort of viral agent that may be causing some nerve damage, because there is in the literature information about viruses causing certain nerve damage, but it doesn't mean that particular person it's that reason that they've got the MS. It could be a whole lot of other reasons, not being that. So hard to really say in that regard. I know from Terry Walsh, she basically had multiple sclerosis. She's reversed it to a large extent, and it was basically because she was doing a vegetarian diet at the time and her nutrition was suboptimal. And so what she did was she increased organ meats in her diet. So she massively increased the organ meats in her diet and actually improved her own sort of health in that regard. So she was able to reverse the condition by improving her, so she was depleted in B vitamins, she was depleted in a lot of things, and that seemed to work for her. So, and I know that I actually bumped into a comedian who was part of the Doug Anthony All-Stars, and people probably know who I'm talking about in Australia. And I sort of was involved with a guy for years that basically used to bring comedy and different sort of entertainers down into Tasmania. This is back when I was in my 20s, so I was sort of involved doing some of the advertising material for those sort of things. Yeah, exactly. So sort of flyers and all sorts of things, posters. So back then, so I haven't done it for years. So I'm very rusty when it comes to that. But and that's how I knew these sort of guys. So I was able to basically, and this guy basically had tried this method, but hadn't really worked for him as successfully. Had a bit of but so there may be other things, or maybe didn't apply it to the same degree in the same diligent way. I don't know. So you know what I mean? I didn't really get into a big conversation. So there's still going to be, in that U-type curve, there's still going to be outliers for a whole lot of different reasons. Yes. And it's very hard to really know. Well, you got an extra hour, Take Off the Blinker's got an extra hour compared to me. I do have my I do have my my oxalate drink.
Oh, I think I'm kind
Get a
of
bit of
glad.
coffee.
I don't really like coffee that much. I mean, I like it, but I don't have a habit of consuming it.
Look, a lot of the people in the Mediterranean tend to have a lot of the genes that I have as well. So we actually detox caffeine at about 4 times the rate that most other
Oh,
people do. So I don't even feel it. You know, when I drink a
mm,
coffee, I don't get a buzz from the caffeine. It just sort of because it's cleared out of my system at within, compared to somebody else that may take 6 hours, within 1.5 hours. I can have a late coffee in the evening and then go straight to bed an hour later, and I'm out like that. Has no effect on me whatsoever, the caffeine.
yeah,
So it's genetics, you know. I'm just
yes.
lucky in that regard.
I really couldn't do that. I wouldn't sleep at all.
Yeah, look, I can, you know, it doesn't affect me at all.
That's very
Many times I have
interesting.
late coffees, and it just bang, I go to bed immediately within 5 minutes. I'm out, so it doesn't affect me at all. Probably.
Oh, I'm being asked what I eat. It seems Daniel is asking.
Somebody's asking you, oh, what, you know,
Yeah.
tell us what do you eat? I mean,
So basically, I'm still on a starch-based diet. I mostly eat whole foods, and it's mostly rice and beans for the majority of my calories. But I eat like a sizable amount of meats and varied meats. It's like pork, fish, beef, like basically everything. And it's been mostly this way since I can chew, basically, since I consume solid foods. And yeah, I've been changing up some things. I've been making some plant-free meals, but I'm still mostly dependent on my carbs.
were you before doing any other sort of specific diet, or did you do veganism or vegetarianism
No,
or any of the no,
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 no, none
yeah.
of that whatsoever. I was highly skeptical of that, even several years before. Uh, like even before Bart or any other person, I was almost coming to the same conclusions that you guys keep talking about, but I had no one to back it up. But when I discovered this carnivore community, I was like, oh, this is basically what I was thinking all this time. But now I have some people to help me understand stuff a little bit better.
Mm. Look, a lot of people, you know, have different reasons. I mean, I sort of transitioned because I basically, after my cardiovascular issue about a decade ago, I sort of shifted over to a sort of a high fat Mediterranean diet. Went back to eating the way my father did, low glycemic vegetables and different meats and, you know, eggs and, you know, and certain pies. Like zucchini pies and pumpkin pies and things like that, which is sort of a traditional peasant type meals that
Yes.
you know, that I sort of grew up on these sort of things. And but then, you know, I sort of came across the paleo community, sort of went down the paleo path. Then sort of after that, sort of went into the low carb community, did keto for a while, went back to low carb, and then eventually I sort of through that period, I just started reducing the amount of, you know, especially because I had some kidney stones and all that, and so I sort of got rid of a lot of the greens and sort of went to pumpkins and you know, things that had lower oxalates in them. But then eventually I started, you know, I just enjoyed eating more meat, sort of meaty, hearty, meaty type foods, and over time I just reduced. And then when I did come across the carnivore community, I basically sort of jettisoned the rest sort of at that stage. So that's sort of my progression, but I'm not 100%, you know, and our community is not like a vegan community. It's
Yes.
sort of, it promotes basically a meat heavy type of lifestyle, but it doesn't basically, and I'm very different compared to a lot of others. Sort of in the carnivore community, I sort of promote more of a Mediterranean style where it includes seafood, and a lot of other different types of animal type foods. So I think it's a sort of richer in that regard for people, and it probably suits the majority of people around the world. I think could much easier transition to a meat heavy sort of Mediterranean style carnivore diet than a sort of a stock standard just muscle meat and nothing else. That's my opinion. What do you think?
I think the same as well. Oh, by the way, you haven't said a rich tapestry ever since I got on.
I was leaving that for you.
Yes, I believe the same as well. And since I have like somewhat close native Brazilian ancestry on my family, I do know that they ate like several different species of animal, and I think it's fundamental to like make use of all the different sources of nutrients and stuff. It's
exactly
purely logical, I guess.
Well, that's what humans always did. I mean, they did have even in the paleo period, they did have some fruit and some starch and all that, but it was seasonal. It was very seasonal because it was only available seasonal. You had no refrigeration, no capacity to store things like that because they would just rot. So you only had a bit of access, and a lot of like tubers were never used really because tubers are very hard. You have to really dig them out. And it's only when you're really having you're in conditions of starvation, you would access those. The majority of sort of stuff that humans consume were basically seasonal fruit, and most animals in nature, if you look at it, whether it's the bears or any animal in nature is usually, they'll eat their salmon and all sorts of other things. And then before they go into hibernation, in the fall, there'll be so much fruit around, they'll just sit down. They can have a session like 10,000 grapes within one sitting. So they engage the Randall cycle, and as a consequence, they get fat, they build fat stores, and then they're able to survive their hibernation.
Yep.
So that's how I view it, in a sense that if you seasonally do it. And the other thing, about UV radiation basically depleting deuterium. So even though these foods are high, you're having them seasonally, it's probably less of a problem. It's suboptimal, but it's not going to basically kill you in that regard. Long hair, the only silver lining of this virus.
Oh, I hate long hair. Oh my god.
Yes, I think basically Honest would, and a few of the others would probably want me to actually grow it more and actually end up with a ponytail or something. I've heard all sorts of suggestions. God almighty, 54 with a ponytail. That's all I need.
Don't know about you, Harry, but I'm really into the short hairs and stuff because it's much easier to care for.
Yeah, that's primarily, I'm too lazy to basically having to perm it or wash it, or maintain it and stuff like that. It's just too much trouble, and mine grows very fast, so I need to cut it back. And especially now that I'm eating more animal foods, it seems like it grows faster than it used to. So it's a bit of a hassle in that regard.
Well, he's asking for pictures.
That's right. Have you got anything you want to share of where you are, your locality?
Well, I haven't been going out much. Not sure if there's a lot I can share for now, but
Okay.
he can look for if he looks for the rural locations in the state of São Paulo in Brazil.
Yeah, just put a Google link for him, and that should keep him happy in the description.
I did take a picture of myself exercising these days, but I'm not comfortable sharing that.
Fair enough. Well, Shel, you could always, you'd always be welcomed in these different parts of the world. But unfortunately, at the moment, yes, it's quite restricted. We can't really get around. you got a bit of a fan club there, mate. Yes,
Well,
yeah.
thanks for the support, everyone.
Okay, New Zealand. Yeah, New Zealand's very much like Tasmania. So just for people's general reference, it's has a very similar environment and climate. So Tasmania's not like, it's much greener, where the other parts of Australia are very different. So it's anybody that actually comes from, just a quick reference, anybody that comes from the British Isles, Tasmania and New Zealand, in particular the southern island of New Zealand, are very similar to that part of the world. So it's probably why they were attracted to it in the first place. Okay. G'day, mate. Yes. New person, I haven't. Bowerbird.
Yeah, he was
good to
on.
See, yep. Yeah, exactly, on Bart's as well. So it's good to see him over here. Yep. Good Perth girl. So what was this? Can you explain the suggestion of Brits to eat cod during Bart's stream? Sorry, I missed the explanation. Okay. Actually, the funny thing is, when we actually were in that transition, we actually sat and spoke about this. I actually chatted with him about it. The thing that's there are two main issues of people from the British Isles. Because they're an islander population, like the Icelandic population, they tend to basically consume a lot of like the seafood. And also because of the climate, you have to think about going back much colder in the past. The level of agriculture was very limited on the British Isles. Large parts of people's protein and people's sources of retinol, which is the animal form of vitamin A, basically came from things like cod liver, those sort of seafoods. And also because people are consuming those sort of foods, which tend to also have a higher concentration of sort of choline and all that, the level of downregulation of choline biosynthesis, and also the downregulation of people's retinol conversion. Because if you're basically consuming large amounts of cod liver, well, you don't need a lot of retinol to be converted from carotenoids, because otherwise you'd basically end up with a lot of carotenoids in your skin, and you'd end up looking like Mick the Vegan, very orangey. So pretty much, your genetics are more suited. People in the Mediterranean like myself have better conversion rates of beta carotene. People in the British Isles, in these sort of northern latitudes, tend to have much poorer. So as a consequence, you either have to go back to eating things like cod and cod liver and stuff like that to get those nutrients, and be very careful about vegetable consumption at the same time. And in particular, you wouldn't want to, you definitely, in that part of the world, it would be criminal to basically utilize carotenoids as, a vitamin A source. It's just crazy. So you have to be very careful. So you don't want to be consuming a lot of carrots and stuff like that. So you want to be getting, your basically your vitamin A from the animal source. So, and that's the only reason I said, the Irish and Scots have probably got some of the lower levels, where the English tend to be mixed. Some of them have poor beta carotene conversion. Some of them have better. It depends which parts of England they come from. So it's a very sort of mixed bag, because you did have some agriculturalists that came in that part of the world who came from Anatolia right through Europe to that part thousands of years ago. So they intermixed with the local population there. So they do have some genetics in that regard. But areas like Wales, Scotland, Ireland, those parts tend to have much lower levels of beta carotene conversion, and so much greater issues in terms of looking at getting those ancestral foods into their diet, or people that originate from those areas. So I hope that sort of explains things, what I was sort of talking about, the cod side of things. And there are varied levels. They're pretty low levels also in terms of the choline. Their choline requirements are also much higher throughout the whole of the British Isles. And I don't know exactly all the causal reasons behind it. I think because they ate everything of the animal, they had no option because of low availability of nutrition on the island back in, thousands of years ago. And I suspected that they would have consumed much greater levels of organ meats. And as a consequence of that, their choline sort of internal biosynthesis actually declined. So it's probably a reason for that, and in that regard, where, Han Chinese is a different thing. I can't remember which emperor, the reign of a specific emperor, and there was a long period of time where certain foods were removed from the diet substantially, which forced this genetic change in them. But I can't remember the actual that family of that emperor at that time. So I'll have to basically go back and look at it and try and remember. Okay, Canada's leaders have decided to help the economy by sharing their homemade cheesecakes recipes. Okay.
That sounds really helpful.
Wonderful. So more sugar to, help the virus along, and, just general health issues in Canada. Great. You can expect that from the Canadian leaders. Yeah. Ludices. What's this? Tropical up north and Tassie like down south. Yeah, something like that. Yeah. Well, if you think about it, Australia is, it's a massive, you should know, it's a massive continent. We are a massive continent. And so, yes, we have all sorts of weather, take your pick, from tropical right down to very freezing. If you go down to Macquarie Island, which is below Tasmania, it's sort of Arctic. It's like parts of southern New Zealand are slightly Arctic. Really, they really are cold. You freeze your butt off. I've got a question. Expected time to transition properly into fat adaptation and the presence of ketones materialize prior to full adaptation. Yep, ketones will basically will emerge much earlier. I mean, even on a SAD diet, if you take an MCT, you'll get ketones. So ketones aren't really what. Usually, you'll get this like a sort of it's sort of like an average sort of curve. Initially your ketones will really go, as you get more fat adapted, they'll go higher and higher, and then over time they'll come down because you get more fat adapted and you start utilizing those ketones more effectively. Because you remember you have to build a whole lot of enzymes or transcription. You have to tell the body, so there are nutrient sensing they sense what's happening, what sort of substrates of nutrients are coming in, and then the body starts changing the enzymatic profile of the stuff that it needs to basically break down the stuff that you're consuming. It's called hydrolyzing, nutrients. But generally speaking, the body has a transition period of adaptation that actually happens. And ketones actually, when you're really fat adapted, actually come much lower. They end up being in a very low gradient. I mean, when I go into a state of ketosis, even when I'm actually fasting, my levels don't go very high like they used to. When I first sort of did the keto diet, they used to go into the 3 and 4 millimole range. That's never happened to me. Even when I fasted for a couple of days, I can't get it to that high because I'm so fat adapted now. When I switch over, the machinery's there, it's all ready to go. And basically you have this much lower level, but you still have, and you don't have the sort of euphoria that you had the first time you went keto. So that's one thing that I have noticed. So, it's, once you're fat adapted, you don't have the same, you only have it's not really a euphoria. It's basically a much higher level of energy availability. And so you start noticing that difference between when you're on a SAD diet and now you're on a keto diet, and you're going, wow, because there is a substantial difference in terms of energy, because you're getting all these glycemic shocks when you're on a high carb diet. So you're always basically having sugar, and then you're feeling lethargic and weak and sleepy and all that.
Yes.
So so that's the difference when you fat adapt. But once you're over that fat adaptation period, then you get into sort of this more normalized sort of state, and so you don't notice much of the difference. You you just don't feel ravenously hungry like you were when you're on carbs. That's the only difference. That's the only telltale sign.
Yes, I'm a witness for that as well. Actually, the reason I came across keto dieting was because I was looking into raising my cognitive function. I wanted to have better concentration and better attention throughout the day. And I came across keto. And this was before I had any issues, and even now my health isn't bad or anything. I just have this damn autoimmune disorder,
Look, as I said, you've been struggling with some of that and sort of trying to work away from, walk away from sort of the carbs, and that's probably a better thing you can do over time to deal with some of these autoimmune sort of conditions. So Bell Bird actually says coffee makes me sleepy sometimes. Yeah, well, you may have the same genetics as me. Really can clear out coffee really fast, and so you lose that. I notice it when I lose that sort of, I sort of become a bit more. So it doesn't. It's because it clears so fast out of the system. I don't get the prolonged effect of caffeine to keep you alert. And that's what coffee does. It keeps you alert. But if you clear out the caffeine very quickly out of your system, you lose that alertness. But you still got the tiredness of the whole day, that's actually passed. So yeah, it seems like a strange effect, but it's, you're tired because you've been physically and mentally active for the whole day. You're in the evening, so your melatonin will be up. You're already in that sleep sort of mode. You're clearing out the caffeine so fast that it's not acting as a substantial stimulant like in other people that are more sensitive to caffeine. And so, that's just normal to be, I feel like that as well. It doesn't really have much of an effect on me either, so you're lucky in that regard as well. You probably can handle alcohol as well because the same detox pathway works for alcohol as it works for coffee. Yes, that doesn't mean that it's a license to go crazy like I used to when I was younger. Yep. Look, there's a lot of people that have the genetics for it. They can clear it quickly out of the system. So if you're lucky, you're lucky. If you're not, sorry, bad luck. So g'day, Raymond. So Raymond hello from Toronto, Canada. Could you discuss redox potential and how to optimize it? Basically, when you see all those, remember when we were looking at the diagram, if anybody saw the diagram that I showed on the actual, the Krebs cycle and all that, and you saw all those little things, NADH, NAD plus sort of things around as you went around for the different, that's all those redoxes in a sense. So when we're talking about redox potential, it's that sort of to move those electrons between one and the other, that's recycling, and in a sense produce that metabolic water and produce that energy. So the more that potential is capable of working, the better your energy will be. So that means if you've better energy, you can repair your body much better, you can detox much better, you feel more alive in a sense. So that's what we're talking about, improving your redox potential. Now, what are things that actually reduce your redox potential? Non-native EMFs have an effect on the redox potential. Things like sugar, high sugar diets tend to have an effect on that. People who have a low, especially when it comes to riboflavin B2, status, tend to have a much lower. Also, niacin is a very important precursor to NAD plus. And you want more NAD plus because that actually declines with age, and so does your energy, and so does your capacity to do all these sort of things. So what you need to increase is foods that are much higher in B3 in that regard. So there's a number of organ meats are very high. Pork compared to other meats tends to have more than other meats. That sort of stuff. You can supplement. Some people do supplement. I use niacin, but not unlike the others. There's a lot of stuff out there that actually is promoted. It's not fun. It's not like some of the stuff that they use in the experiments on the rats. Some of the stuff that basically what David Sinclair has and he uses is the stuff that he uses from the rat studies. That's not the stuff that's actually been sold commercially, unfortunately. And that stuff that gets commercially is not as optimal in that regard. But when it comes to niacin, it is. It actually, because at the end of the day, it's nicotinic acid or NA that basically is what is at the closest stage. And the other thing is when you consume it and goes through the gut, you've got less issues there where it could be potentially lost from the other supplements. The downside with the nicotinic acid, when you do supplement, you don't want to do very high levels. I do 250 milligrams, which is still quite a bit, but it's not in the one sort of 1,000 type milligrams, which some people do and stuff like that. I think that's too much. But what happens is when you do that, it's good to have food before you do it. Otherwise, you'll get this really, because it really it perforates all the tissue around your body so fast because it absorbs so rapidly because it's more close to the human form. So it absorbs very rapidly. And you get this tingling sensation all over your hands and your body, and it lasts for about half an hour. And how severe it is how much other foods you've got to slow it down. So if you've got food in your stomach and then you take it, it will slow down how quickly it actually gets into your system. But you'll still get some tingling and all that. Some people can handle that, some people can't. I can, and it does help with a lot of things. Cardiovascular health, nitric oxide synthesis, building new blood vessels in the heart or other areas of muscles to improve their actual efficiency and function, which is one of my primary focuses. But at the same time, you can utilize it for those other therapeutic purposes of improving your redox potential, your ability to detox, to basically to heal, to provide energy to your body and all that. So because it's basically supporting NAD+. So I hope that helps. So try to optimize your foods in that regard. Reduce the foods which are also going to impede, because okay, you may have redox potential, the ability to move those electrons through, very, much more within your mitochondria. But at the end of the day, those will end up at complex 5. Okay, so they'll end up there where the nanomotors are. Now, if you don't have a clean fuel or the protein gradients, if you remember that diagram, just before there was a thing called fumarate, just before metabolic water comes out. It's actually called fumarate hydratase. It's sort of connected to complex 2, and that's where it has an influence on the protein gradients that comes into the inner layer of the mitochondria, and then basically gets pushed through those little rotating nanomotors at the end. So if you're basically putting shit through and you're retarding those nanomotors to produce energy, ATP, and you're loading up the redox, a lot of electrons being, efficiently pushed through, you're going to create issues in your mitochondria. You're going to back up all that thing. So it's not enough to improve your redox potential by eating properly and all that, but also making sure you keep the deuterium down, either using sun to dislodge those neutrons and get rid of them, or basically using the ability of the body to use metabolic water to clear out those neutrons and basically then get the body to piss them out. So that's the whole purpose of fumarate hydratase, the sort of that, to improve the actual gradients and to basically create both metabolic water and also remove that sort of stuff out of the actual system in that regard. So anyway, hope that sort of helps. So, it's not enough to fix one. You really need to take care of all the functioning of the mitochondria. A lot of people sort of reductionistly just talk about redox potential or just talk about the nanomotors, but you've got to talk about all of it. Anyway, I know Luke loves things about nanomotors.
Absolutely. But when you mentioned the mechanism of UV radiation depleting deuterium, I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, it does. It does.
Researching to understand how it works, but I wasn't finding any results, And I have studied nuclear chemistry before.
It's part of biophysics. It's not part of biochemistry. It's part of biophysics. This sort of thing, how basically out of this sort of isotope of hydrogen, how basically the interaction, how these high energy sort of UV comes through and actually just knocks and displaces that proton out. That neutron out of that. So as a consequence, is able then through this part of producing metabolic water to clear it out. So it's part of that process. But a lot of people don't realize it's one of the reasons why people in the tropics that consume fruit, because in the tropics you get two fruit seasons, as you're aware of. You don't get one but two.
Yes.
And people basically will consume those. I mean, now they consume more year round, unfortunately, because they got refrigeration. But in the past, they only had 2 periods of the year they had access to fruit. And those periods also tend to be periods when there was sufficient solar radiation around. So that helped deplete the deuterium that was in the fruit, which is more concentrated in that regard. And also people didn't consume massive amounts either, because most of the fruit, especially wild fruit that would have been in the earlier times, had very limited sugar anyway. It was very small in size and all that. It's different compared to the domesticated stuff we have today, which is, in that regard. I mean, even in your area, I suspect there wouldn't be a very high, people wouldn't, go out of their way. Traditionally, the older people wouldn't consume massive amounts of fruit.
Yes.
From your own experience, because I know people in the tropics, I know older people like in Indonesia and all that, they don't go out of their way to actually consume fruit.
And the funny thing is the fruit consumption, it actually went up as like conventional guidelines started being like.
Yep, that's exactly it. And thanks for actually pointing that out, Luke, because a lot of people are unaware. People outside the tropics don't realize that people in the tropics did not consume. They may have had occasionally here or there, but they weren't big consumers. People were more interested in trying to get meat, trying to get, because that's what they lacked, and that's what they really wanted. You ask old people, if you put meat in front of fruit, they'll take the meat.
Yes,
because they know it's more valuable.
Oh God.
I see it in Indonesia. You put stuff out and you see all these young people hitting all the sweets and all the other stuff, and you see all these old people hitting all the meats, those sort of things, because they know where the value is. And you go and you can see this generational difference of older people that still have their traditions and younger people that have lost them because the governments have told them, oh, you should eat fruit, 100 times a day.
It doesn't make any sense whatsoever, because the fruit that is available today is mostly the highly selectively bred fruit that is nothing like our ancestral fruits. We have the acerola berries. I guess some people know about them. They are made into vitamin C supplements.
Yep.
That is a good example of a fruit that is similar to its wild counterparts. Acerola berries, they are tiny, they are sour, not very sweet.
Precisely.
And they are very seasonal as well.
Exactly. Even our old apples, for instance. I mean, I remember even up in Greece, in the mountainous areas where there were apple trees, old apple trees that had been there for many years. And basically all those apples were much smaller and had that sort of sour type. They didn't have a lot of sugar, because most fruit in nature, natural fruit, doesn't have. We've just selected and bred more sugar into them. It's completely unnatural what we've done to fruit. And thanks for pointing that out, Luke, because a lot of people that don't live in the tropics are completely unaware of a lot of this sort of stuff.
No problem, Harry. Glad to be of service. It annoys me as well, because I guess people have the point of view of all these raw vegans and people that make these romantic views about living in the tropics and stuff.
Yeah, it's nonsense. I hear it all the time, and I've been in sort of the Southeast Asia and tropics and those sort of areas since the age of 18. So I've seen both these societies transform into the modern societies with big middle classes, and before the way they were before. So for me, it doesn't basically, it doesn't gel. It just doesn't gel, because I know what people ate in the past and how they ate and how they lived and worked and all that. And when you see the modern sort of stuff, you go, this is just nonsense. People are just pulling your leg, But unfortunately, people just don't realize that. Anyway, I remember being so broke as a kid, we ate navy bean soup for 3 weeks. God almighty. So glad to get the hell out of there. Yeah, well, that would have been bad. I mean, that's actually navy beans are, if they're not prepared properly, they're actually some of the worst. You can have a very small amount and actually, potentially die. They in their raw form. Not a very dangerous sort of thing in that regard. Okay, so Susan's asked, do you have any thoughts on the substantial elevated cholesterol from low carb carnivore lean mass hyperresponders and also ApoE44 genetic influence on CVD and Alzheimer's? Okay. Now, it all has to do with the clearance. So when it comes to look, let's first talk about the cholesterol side of things. Elevated cholesterol, when you're on a low carb diet, you'll get some level of elevated of cholesterol. It will vary depending on your ApoE status. Okay, so that's a little thing that's actually tied to your HDL, which is the ApoE, and basically depending on the type you have, because it interacts with the other lipids and takes some of the cholesterol out of there, all about sort of recycling. And then it also, the level of receptors that are on the liver will differ. So the amount that will be in the system will depend on the clearance. So certain things clear much faster than other people. And it depends on a lot of things, a lot of factors. Even when it comes to chylomicrons, when stuff comes through the actual gut itself, people are fat adapted, in a sense. Trigs can come down substantially because they can move through within 15 minutes. And then at the actual, at the actual base, where your gut is, you're lining the inner part where all these chylomicrons will sit, they'll actually move through at a certain rate dependent on energy requirements and, the body's adaptation and whatever else. So all these things, depending on what you eat, whether what type of you have, genetics can influence the actually resident time. People that tend to have a 4-4, 4-2, and 4-3 have higher resident times because they've got less LDL receptors to basically take in those lipids out of the system, out of circulation. So they circulate for longer. They don't do anything, if they're available. The difference is a person who's got an ApoE44, which is the ancestral form, which chimps have as well, will give you greater protection against pathogens in the environment. So that means a 4-4 will do much better when you've got, things like bacteria infections, viral infections, different sort of, worms or whatever. Your immune system tends to be much stronger and capable of sort of killing off these sort of parasites and keeping them at bay. So a lot of the tribal societies still have a much higher level of 4-4 because they still are more exposed to pathogens in the environment compared to people who became agriculturalists or people that had less. So there's a couple of issues there as well, and also has to do with changes in sort of food availability and all that. And that's I'm going to do something in the future about that, so I won't go into that, the influence of that. But that, and hyperresponders will tend to, it's always lean hyperresponders. So you've basically got less fat stores to basically to provide energy for the body in terms of ketones and in terms of triglycerides. And so the body needs to basically tends to sort of ramp up the sort of production, and so tends to actually increase it much higher than what it would be normal. You know, even for the hyperresponder, if they had a bit of fat tissue on them, it would be slightly lower. The leaner somebody gets, the more you will elevate those lipids in your blood, for the simple reason that you need that extra energy to be available. So that's the sort of the sort of crux of why these people. Now, in terms of CVD and all that, that has to more to do with that. If you're basically having a lot of circulating lipids and then you're on a SAD diet, that SAD diet will mean that you will damage more of those lipids. That's the whole reason for statins, to try and push the amount of lipids in the bloodstream that can be oxidized. But that's, just get rid of the oxidation. If you get rid of the oxidation, you don't have to worry about lowering your cholesterol. So the whole reason is it's back to front, So they knew that lipid peroxidation was caused by PUFA, by vegetable oils that were in the food supply. They did all the mechanistic studies back in the 80s. I've talked about them before. If you go back and check some of the Bar K chats that I've actually had, I go into detail about all the history and all that. I'm not going to do that today because that just takes too long. There are other people that are waiting. So in that regard, is that it's more of an issue that these lipids will get oxidized, and then you're at risk from these sort of diseases, and mostly it's, Alzheimer's, or dementia. There are more people with ApoE33s that have, in some societies, more Alzheimer's and dementia than 4/4s. So it's not a guarantee just because you've got the ApoE44 that you're going to basically end up with Alzheimer's or cardiovascular disease. It just basically puts you at higher risk in terms of that there's more circulating lipids that basically could get oxidized and damaged and then cause these problems. So, so people that have got this sort of phenotype, they need to be on a much lower inflammatory diet, a more ancestral diet, because they're a greater risk from seed oils and high sugar, refined sugar, than people who don't have these genetics. So it's not really, so it has nothing to do with the genetics, CVD, or it's just an association. There's no causal, but it basically has to do that you have, as a consequence of low receptor numbers, you can't clear out as much LDL. More of it remains circulating, and in an inflamed environment, you'll end up with more being oxidized and more causing damage both to your endothelial cells, your arteries and stuff like that, and parts of your brain. Because we know, if you look at the thing that I did with Bart, talking about lipids getting through the blood-brain barrier, fats, and basically the brain using fats, oxidizing fats as well. So if you check that, the recent one that I did with Bart, that sort of explains, why these sort of things can get into your, and if you cause in the astrocyte, a certain level of inflammation, you're going to cause damage to, to those mechanisms in there and to the lipids that are being utilized. So, it's all basically a consequence of an inflammatory diet and less to do with these genetics. It just makes you a bit more vulnerable because you've got more circulating. That's the only difference. Where, let's say somebody's got an ApoE of 2.2, the level of circulating lipids is going to be much lower. That means the chance of sugar or seed oil actually causing damage to the membrane or to the receptor is much lower. So it basically means that less will get damaged. And since less will get damaged, less will end up in your endothelial cells or other parts of your body causing damage. So it's really that issue. So if you've got those genetics, you have to be somebody that really avoids all seed oils and all sugar, refined sugars, and that sort of way of eating. That will keep you healthy, and that will mean that your lipids will not get oxidized or damaged or cause any issues in your body. It's ultimately it's your choice, what sort of dietary approach you take and what sort of risk you're willing to accept. But all this bullshit about hyper responders and the people having too high, if you basically have got less receptors to take it out, obviously you're going to have more circulating time. What about it? It's not the amount of circulating time that lipids are involved in. It's whether they're getting damaged while they're circulating. They can be circulating for less time and still. I mean, I've got ApoE33 genes. So I never had high cholesterol. I had a relatively, mild to low cholesterol. So, but I still ended up in hospital with cardiovascular disease. But I was consuming a lot of seed oils and cooking everything in seed oils. So I was inflaming my body and causing a lot of peroxidation throughout the whole body, lipid peroxidation as it's called. So I was damaging a lot of my LDLs even though I had less circulating. So, obviously somebody with a 4-4 is probably even more prone to oxidation if they do such a diet. So it's really the diet, not your genetics, that determine whether you end up with Alzheimer's or CVD or any sort of ailment. So I hope that helped.
Where is Jared? Wasn't he supposed to be?
I don't. Yeah. He may be late. I had a chat with him yesterday, a private chat. So we had a sort of a long private chat about a number of things, and then so yeah. So what's this all about? Beta hydroxybutyrate blood usually seen within 48 hours. Once liver glycogen depleted. Yep. Yeah. Well, you can actually do it even faster than that. I've basically, I'll fast for the whole day. If I want to push myself into keto very quickly, I'll fast and then go. I'll lift weights a couple of times a day, and I'll even go for a long bloody walk to deplete as much glycogen as possible. And I can actually push myself in to very high ketones within 24 hours. So, but it obviously means you really have to fast and literally go out there and hit the pavement hard and hit the weights hard so you can deplete as much glycogen as possible. That'll get you quickly into a state of ketosis. But yeah, usually it's anywhere between 48 to 72 hours before most people, will deplete sufficient glycogen to basically get themselves into that sort of state. But then some people that are really dysregulated can take even longer than that, a couple of weeks. So, and they can have these sort of glycemic sort of like shocks and all that. And I usually say to those people that if you're in one of those sort of categories, up your fat as much as possible. So you're still providing your body with some level of energy, and focus less on the weight loss at that point. So up your fat to a level where you can basically maintain energy so you can feel functional. And then as you transition through, 1 or 2 weeks, you can basically lower for a couple of days, see how you feel. And if you're basically at that stage fat adapted, then you can basically, moderate your fat, get your protein right to the level that it's required, and then the rest will come from your body. You still need some fat. You need to occasionally spike and reduce in this interval type thing, because you want to still maintain, you want to still be giving the body a bit of a boost in types of energy, which actually, will keep that sort of metabolic sort of rate going at a much higher pace in that regard. So occasionally you want to spike, you want to come back a couple of days, lower, then spike again, then lower, which is more the natural sort of flow that, humans would have had that had a small amount of food that they would have found, and then they would have feasted on a big bloody mammoth or whatever. So things like that, hope that makes sense. And you pet brown snake, wonderful.
Well, pretty exotic.
Hope it's not poisonous. I have handled one snake, but that was a python. But I have never handled anything other than that. I don't like snakes. I'll be honest. I don't like snakes. I have nothing. I basically prefer insects to snakes, but that's me. I used to actually grab spiders with me and my younger sister. Yeah, crazy things, but anyway. But I just, it's the slitherness. It's slithery, it just, I don't know. It just feels a bit weird to me. But that's, everybody has different ways things feel. I bet you did in Perth. Was he called Snappy?
On a side note, Bart just showed up on chat, and he's saying that Pin is demanding that I show up on her next stream.
Hey, I beat you to it, Mr. K. Smart Jack. Oh yeah, about the fat adaptation. Yep, we've already spoken about that. Flick blueberries and dry them for a year around goodness. So yeah, WT wants to engage the Randall cycle year round. Just do a sad diet. I mean, it's easy. Why complicate life that much? Oh, well, make sure Daniel's not around because he'll eat your pet.
Well, I usually eat shark when I go in vacation at the coast.
Oh, look. Biggest problem with Sharky is that it's higher in mercury nowadays, unfortunately, and it doesn't have the level of selenium that's needed. But at the end of the day, if you consume other foods that are very high in selenium at the same time as you're having shark, like eggs or liver or stuff like that in that period, you can mitigate some of that sort of mercury and chelate it out in that regard. So, in the form of, the thing that I did about selenide sort of chelating and taking it out. It's not a very stable chelator. That's the downside. So you don't want to be too inflamed, which is the other thing in your diet, because it can be an issue with the actual chelation itself. Hostilities. We will not have that. Still funny. I'm waiting for a reply from Bart on that one. But then he keeps on telling me, I'm half Australian. Yeah. Heard that before, mate. Adaptation happens in stages. Yep, can for different people for a whole lot of different reasons. How insulin resistant they are, all sorts of damn issues. How committed they are to doing certain things. Yeah, never an easy answer. But I always, if you really want to, if you've got big issues, always, as I've said before, because I don't do consultancies, go and see Bart or somebody like Pim or whatever, and basically ask them for help if you're highly insulin resistant in that regard, because that takes time. That takes time, somebody to coach you along, explain things, provide feedback, so that's not something that can be done, with one answer. So if anybody needs that sort of help, they know where to go. And you should be supporting those carnivores that are out there that are doing the right thing by our community. that regard. Vegetables aren't the best choice here in the outback. Well, yeah, well, they'd rot and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, so definitely not the best. Look, most societies. I mean, my great grandfather, he hated vegetables anyway, because they were too, for him, they were too soggy or stuff like that. From what my father tells me, but he basically loved meat. But he was best. But his true passion was dairy. He consumed quite a bit of dairy products, feta, and milk from the goats and stuff like that. So that was the things that he enjoyed more in his diet. Did him well, lived to 107, so didn't do him any harm. But he had lactose persistent genes like I have, so it wouldn't have been an issue for him. But ultimately, oops. Just lost my spot. Okay, so wasn't fast enough, and I basically got booted. So pretty much that I think covers it. Harry, you wouldn't happen to know Bart's reasons for saying the recent Hall study should have had washed out periods? Would you? Look, I never, as you know, Zach, I've always said I never comment on what another carnivore has said or hasn't or whatever. It's one of my policies. I sort of stay clear of that. So you'll have to go and ask that person. So it's just,
It's just a code of honor.
It's just the way I've always followed that. Give me a sec. Just hold off. That's Dad at the door.
I actually may need to talk to my parents myself. Just a second. I'm back already, by the way. Well, I mean, while Harry is out, so Necrokitty was telling me to talk about why I haven't changed my diet yet, but it's mostly for the fact that I don't know if I'll be spending more money or less. So I need to take. I prefer to become an independent adult before I actually spend someone else's money with my diet. And also, I can't afford a transition period while I'm studying. So yeah, there's this problem also. If I go through all that hardship of transitioning my diet, which is working now, mostly, I guess, if I can't take a proper rest period or just enjoy a period of less productivity while I'm still on university. So that's my main reason for not transitioning yet.
Yeah, that my dad turned up and dropped some stuff off, and then he's gone off to his mate up further up. An Italian friend of I think his Italian friend lives up this way, so he's off to see his mate, and then he'll end up going home. So He said, "Oh, you're online." I go, "Yeah, I'm online." So he said, "So I'm not going to have a coffee." I said, "No." So I said, "Oh, well, here you go," and he pissed off.
No, I'm not. I'm not doing push-ups on stream. Maybe later.
Oh, yes. Bart's demands. That's true. Could be worse. It could be demanding more other things. Okay. It's bloody cold out here. Oh, still waiting for the sun to get out. Yes, WA. They're a couple of hours behind the eastern seaboard. Actually, my younger sister lives in Perth now, so she's enjoying the warmer weather compared to Tasmania, and keeps on sending me bloody messages about how great it is out here. And I usually send her these sort of messages back. Family. Yep, that's exactly how I feel with family as well. It's sort of, so yes. Yes, I love them to death. You're on the wrong channel, mate. Uh, he Googled the. You must have Googled the wrong channel. He'll be hounding you now to turn up on his live stream next week.
Yes.
So just warning you.
This was to be expected, after all.
Oh, look, it's like anything. I mean, I remember the first time I actually went on Bart's for the first time when I did. This was last year, and I think it was around August. So that was, that's less than a year. That sort of felt really strange, and I was very anxious and very sort of apprehensive, and I hadn't done any public speaking for years, and so it was a bit uncomfortable in that regard. But look, over time, you just sort of smoothly get into it. Everybody's pretty much nice within the carnivore community, thankfully, and we're all easygoing, and that's it. So,
Yes. But I can relate to the anxiety.
thanks, mate. We love you also. Yeah, he's a naughty boy, isn't he? I'm honest. Oh, God. With all that innuendo, he probably needs a bit of spanking, doesn't he? We'll have to get Pim to do something. I have no idea where he is at the moment. Just to put that up. So he has a link. I did send him a link. And he said because I chatted with him yesterday, and he said he would be available. But I know he was having a few things that he was dealing with. So I don't know whether that has sort of taken him away, potentially. Yeah, look, Luke wanted to come on. So I said, yep, come on, let's have something different, a different style and all that. Should we ban him? Should I put that comment into a ban 30 seconds? That would be funny. I'd get some sort of pornographic email after that, I suspect.
I mean, I had to show up sometime. There was basically every time I was on Bart's Discord, it was it was a different person every time saying, "Oh, you should go on sometimes. You should go on Harry's stream or maybe Bart's stream." And I'm like, maybe sometime, but I'm really anxious about this, you know.
Just take it easy. I don't mind you coming on to my stream now and then, and and just getting your confidence up and feeling comfortable about the whole thing and all that sort of,
I mean, it's very weird to be on a carnivore stream when you still eat rice, you know.
We're pretty easy. You can see that Pim also wants to chat with you, and I mean there's like we spoke about earlier in regards to what people eat in the tropics, the older people before all these stupid nutritional guidelines and all that. That's a wealth of information that people aren't aware of. I mean, I'm aware of it because I've been in that sort of environment, but I haven't really spoken about it because it's not part of my tradition. And so it's something potentially you could actually chat about with Bart, with Pim, So we've had a bit of a chat today, but other things, and I think people would find it very interesting in that regard.
Well, I'm happy to help whenever I can.
Look, it's basically, like all of us, it's always an opportunity to chat amongst ourselves and sort of and grow in that sense. The more you do it, your confidence level will come up. It's the same with me, and then you end up getting comments like this. I love you honest.
No, but I have to say, it feels nice to be able to participate over here, because ever since I started watching your videos and Bart's and everyone else's, it's been very enriching, So it's nice to be able to actually participate instead of just watch.
Look, there's different. We have different styles, and I think that's the sort of the nice complementary thing, Like Pim sort of focuses on a lot of the addictions and stuff like that. She has a lot of that sort of content in her sort of streams, which is really nice because we don't really get into that. And then, Bart has the sort of the funnier side, and he goes after sort of certain people and stuff like that, and it has that sort of type of focus. I sort of tend to have a sort of a generalist approach, to sort of nuancing, because I don't do a lot of videos on specific subject matters. I tend to basically, go a bit overboard or go on a tangent, as and that sort of stuff. And people seem to like that as well. That style, going into a bit of depth on certain issues. So it all sort of seems to work very nicely and flows from one stream to another. And sometimes I get I probably get the advantage where a lot of the questions, things that are being discussed on the other streams or came up on the other streams, end up on my stream, which it's also informative for me. It's also puts me under a bit of pressure to sort of think about other things as well and look at other things. So it's sort of, I see it as a sort of benefits all of us in a sense, in a nice way. So what was that? Does anyone know how long to microwave a hamster? God almighty. We need to post this on some of the vegan sites. They'll be on a warpath. Hamster, are we talking about a live hamster or a dead hamster? Yes. Have no idea. I'd stick to, I'd stick to the general stuff, deskin it, put it in an oven. Hamster. Interesting. Yes, we have some people that are in the exotic type food sources, and
yeah, I mean, Necrokitty wants to grow some guinea pigs.
As I said, we've got a very colourful group of people in terms of the sort of foods that they like and stuff like that. They've got exotic tastes. Well, why not? What blood test do you recommend initially? Do you order them online or GP? Basically, I don't do any. I used to. I did actually my last. God, it's now. My last basically, I was basically doing either keto or low carb at the time. I've had blood tests, done prior after that, but my GP doing it would have been now a couple of years, and it was either low carb or keto. I can't remember which. And I did and I actually, through that period, I was actually consuming quite a lot of calories as well through that period, trying to get myself into a higher level of ketosis. So I probably ended up doing accidentally the Dave Feldman type thing, eating a lot of eggs and stuff like that, and pushed my LDL, my cholesterol, my total cholesterol down to 3.2 millimoles, which is, let's try the cholesterol conversion. And I will bring that up, share that on my screen. So is that coming up? Yep, there it is. So if I total, so millimoles to, yep, so it was 3.2, which is 124. So megajoules per milligrams per deciliter. So that's 124, which is the lowest I have ever got it. And the other one was actually 3.7. The one before that, no, 3.7 or 3.8. No, I think it was 3.8. That's right. One before that, and that was 147. So I'm not a hyper responder, guys, just simple as that in that regard. So, and that's why I said, I ended up in hospital with, I believe it at the time was 4.2 millimoles, which is 162. So when I had my cardiovascular incident, that was my level. So has no, as I said, no bearing. And if you look at any, the epidemiological studies, long-term Framingham, whatever, people with the highest cholesterol have the lowest mortality. So it's just not an issue, not even to be considered in that regard. Okay, so not sure about that. Sort of some answer to some other question. Little animals. Exactly. Yes, I generally don't like actually. Even at work, I don't use them. I have on occasions, but I try. They've got like a little oven, and I actually prefer using that. It just becomes, I don't know, too soggy or whatever. I think just microwaves just, yeah. I don't think they're really, yeah. They're just another invention for quickly cooking something, or heating up something. But I think that certain foods really end up very yucky. I don't enjoy them out of a microwave. It's just me. I think it's a lot of other people as well. Yep. Actually, if you want to deplete glycogen pretty quickly, yeah, best way to train is fasted, to deplete your glycogen quite quickly. That was the whole idea. But if you do a lot of weightlifting, obviously, then, and if you're trying to, build muscle and stuff like that, then, there are other protocols. But if you basically want to deplete glycogen pretty fast, go for, I used to go up the hill from North Hobart into basically Mount Stewart, that many people know who live in Hobart or in Tasmania. We're in the southern part of Tasmania. So that's, it's quite a steep hill going up. So if you do that and then you jog all the way back and then you lift weights, I can tell you will deplete plenty of glycogen and you will be in keto within possibly even less than 24 hours. So, I think the best I've actually done it is about really high ketones at about 18 hours. So can be done. But, you really have to put in the hours and all that. Most people are not prepared. So they end up basically cutting back their sugars and all that. And they end up taking a couple of days or sometimes even a couple of weeks, depending on how insulin resistant they are and everything else. I can tell you one thing, if you fast and you do a lot of that sort of exercise, you will deplete glycogen to such levels and you will lower the energy that's in your cells to a level where basically your insulin will drop dramatically and you should be basically producing ketones in a much shorter amount of time. So, but that's from my personal experience. All humans are different, let's be honest. Different people can transcript or basically make adjustments to the type of enzymes they need to create to produce. So there's a different rate between different people. So it will vary in that regard. So and from Zach, that was in regards to something that he was discussing with Bart. Okay. So what's this? Lifting weights is not natural. You should never do that. You would never do that in nature. It makes absolute no sense. That's not exactly entirely true. You will basically, I actually say that, there are a couple of people out there that will basically do like more work related sort of stuff, but we did lift things and we used to carry things. And so, we were lifting stuff and all that. What you may have be saying is what I've said in the past about unnatural, like things where people sort of do sort of isolated movements, isolated type things. They can actually create, imbalances in the way your musculoskeletal. Yeah, that I agree. I've pointed that out in the past. What I'm talking about is when I lift things actually I lift things as if I'm lifting stuff in that sort of style. So, and I've said before, like Ben Greenfield does, where it actually turns over tires. That's sort of, you're actually engaging all sorts of muscles. That's the sort of, when I'm saying lifting weights and moving things around or stuff like that, is the sort of things that I'm talking about. But in this case, I also use isolated things to deplete glycogen, but I'm not doing it as a general thing. So there's a bit of a difference there in that regard. So it depends. If you're consistently doing isolated lifting type of activities, no, I wouldn't say it's a good idea. It's the reason why people get these imbalances and get certain pain, or certain parts of their body doesn't get exercised properly. So your glutes, you end up having a lot of pain in your legs, and I've had that in the past. with glutes, and I had to get a rolling pin to basically sort of massage the glutes, and and then start changing and that's what eventually got me to thinking that these sort of isolated exercises were not very healthy. And then I looked at what Ben Greenfield was doing, and I said, yep, I was wrong, he was right. You sort of have to engage all the body like you would when you did either hunting or fishing or lifting stuff or working. You're engaging all the body, and people that actually work all these muscle groups when they're doing work, they tend to work in, day out, without actually causing themselves any problems. My father was a Boilermaker welder, and he had big, massive muscles. He didn't have to go to the gym to get those. He just had to basically do physically heavy work, manual work, and that's how he got those sort of things. So you don't need to go to a gym in that regard. So and you end up having much healthier sort of muscle skeletal structures as a consequence. So yeah, I would agree that it's unnatural in that regard, but as a short-term thing, it's not going to cause many problems or any problems really.
I would say that one big thing with machines and exercising machines is that the machines give you too much stability, and they allow you to really isolate a muscle, and because of that you won't develop your passive structures like your tendons and ligaments. So that's why it's bad. But isolation work in of itself, if it is combined with other types of exercises, it isn't that detrimental, I would say.
Yep, precisely. It would depend on those other factors as well. That's right. It makes a big difference. So what's Susan? So thank you very much about the detailed explanation. Excellent. If you have any time, any comments on very low homocysteine, 3 of any kind effects would have. Thank you very much. Well, you want to keep homocysteine to lower levels. That's one thing. So that's, but obviously there is a place for homocysteine as well. You don't want it to be down to 0 either. But where it ends up in those lower ranges, I don't think it's a problem. Just let your body regulate that. Everybody has different methylation capacities. And so there's going to be a variation on how homocysteine is managed in that regard. I tend to basically, I'm more susceptible because I can't actually convert methionine to choline to folic acid. I can't do that. I don't have the genes for that. Those areas are blocked. So basically, I have to get them in the diet. I have to eat things like eggs, liver to get the folic acid, the B9. I have to basically support the other pathway as well, which is the choline pathway. If somebody can convert choline to folic acid, then you don't need to eat liver at all. You just need to eat a whole lot of eggs or take a choline supplement. Done. But if you don't have that capacity, which is my predicament, it's a different situation. Then you have to get in the diet. I can take all the choline I want. Yes, I do support the other choline betaine pathway to methylate homocysteine. And also choline does help in methylating estrogen levels, high estrogen levels. But at the end of the day, it will be, a lot of this sort of stuff is determinant on your genetics. So which part of the world do you come from? I can gauge to some extent what your genetic profile may be from the country, the part of the world you come from. But then again, if you come from a mixed marriage of people from diverse backgrounds, anybody's guess, then it becomes really complicated to work out what your potential genetics susceptibilities may be and the sort of things ancestral type animal foods you need to incorporate, so it's always a bit hard with those sort of things. But, obviously the B vitamins and choline, they play a big role in all this sort of side, plus the sort of the levels of methionine in there, and in relation to all these, where those levels are going to be. It's complicated in that regard. So you'd have to do genetic tests, work out that, then look at your diet and all that, and then do some tests and work out exactly where you are and where you're likely to be. But if you're basically eating, some organ meats, some choline-rich foods like eggs and stuff like that, you should have less issues, in relation to whether low or high homocysteine. You definitely want it to be lower than 7. You don't want it to be above that. But, if you're on at the same time, you don't want it to be extremely low. But, what are you eating? Could have a bearing. Certain nutrients have a different bearing depending on the person. So, hard to say. Luke, any ideas? Yes, that was my thought as well. Why would you worry about low homocysteine? So, well, they don't have the energy. And the only ones that can actually lift anything are the ones with taking, apparently, can't confirm or deny, the roids. Well, some of them actually, like Hinch, he's definitely confirmed that he takes the roids. Harley, Julian Ryder, he's definitely confirmed, but he doesn't have fucking much muscles at all. That's because he does a lot of catabolic type exercises. But, yes. I had a snake. Oh, I had snakes. Oh, wonderful. Good that somebody had snakes in our community.
To be honest, I'm not surprised. It does sound like hair to have snakes.
Yeah, I know. It's probably the, what was the little animal she was going to breed?
She wants to breed guinea pigs.
Exactly. The guinea pigs ate the snakes. She fed the snakes to the guinea pigs. She's trying to turn them into. She's trying to turn them into carnivorous guinea pigs.
High quality nutrition, I guess.
Yeah, she would have ground it up. Just poop and eat all day. Yeah. No wonder they think they're ruminants. Next, they'll actually be presenting their shows on all fours. Yes, sushi. It's bad saying. The K family is from the Shire. She's just telling me the Shire in Sydney, Harry. Before that, they were part of the Yorkshire K family in the UK. It's just, how long were you in Australia, mate, or your family? It's a running joke between Australians and New Zealanders on a lot of these things. We take the piss out of each other. It's we have a lot of fun doing it. Got to farm a spot. Got kicked further. Yes, it does. It definitely does. Sometimes we forget about that. Especially the veg tards. Something sounded good.
Well, that's push-ups.
That's why I put it up. You're fucked, aren't you? Where do you get the meat militia and veg tard shirts from? Do you have to ask? You'll have to contact Mr. Barkay for those.
That's a consultancy issue.
Just somebody, can they put up because I'm in the StreamYard now, so can they just put up the actual the merchandise link for Bart's for his t-shirts and all that? And yep. What's he say? I know. What are you going to clean at my dust? What's that all about? BCA, brain chain amino acids, obviously. Plant-based. Okay. I haven't seen it myself in that regard. Most of the stuff that I have seen in the past is that there's low bioavailability of plants. But, obviously there are nowadays some nutraceuticals and some other stuff that they put in plant-based proteins that make them a bit more anabolic. So, but that's, that's not natural. It's just basically like any other thing that's out there. But it tends to be over-processed, high in deuterium. So if you do that for too long, you know me too well, don't you? Yep, there's the merch link for you guys out there that want a t-shirt. I'll tell you, you get a few looks, because when I wore the one with the veg tard, veggie tard as Bart calls it, yeah, I got a few funny looks in North Hobart, so because you don't see that sort of stuff in Tasmania, those sort of carnivore type, or even in the city of Hobart, we don't get a lot of that sort of the food type politics around. So yes, yep, yes, some of the cups and stuff like that.
Yes, I mean, Bart doesn't want to incentivize the consumption of coffee, even if he does do it himself.
Sorry, Zach. Wasn't directed at you, mate. Don't get the wrong idea. I like you, but I don't like you that much. Just joking. But thanks for the initial comment. That's nice. I love to how Bart comes on, and wanted to hear Luke's voice and Harry talking for like 10 minutes straight. Yeah, that's true. I have had a bit of coffee, so I have had a bit of rejuvenation in that regard. I'll have a bit more. It's a double shot, which does help. Sort of, and as we're moving into the circadian sort of thing, it sort of helps as well. No, that won't be happening for some time, mate. So I'm sort of on here just trying to build, to basically do, like people have talked about, Harry, will you do a book or something like that? I said, in the future, probably I'll do like my own tips and tricks on, of how to hack and biohack, different ways of eating and incorporating things and genetics and stuff like that. I want to do something like along those lines that can be helpful for people, and how to interpret their genetics within the food environment that they're in. So, yep, I want to do something like that. But, you have to have, my following is very small currently, and it's not growing as fast as I thought it would grow. So for me to basically get into this sort of stuff, it's not going to happen anytime soon. But, down the track, potentially, I'm not completely against it. The whole motivation for me to come on YouTube was more to tell my story, to try and help other people that may have health issues and stuff like that, and help them with the information that I've got, which is quite diverse and rich, and experiences that I've got, life experiences. So that was my sort of motivation. Ultimately, if you're going to spend more hours doing something, you do, like any human, you do want to monetize it, because you just can't do things, spend multiple hours for no, just, I enjoy it occasionally doing it, like the live streams and all that, but to do it for multiple hours with zero reward, obviously will be taxing to me as a person in the long run if I do it for years. Obviously I'd hope that my channel would grow, so now I'm financially comfortable enough to basically finance my own trips and all that. It's a question of actually now getting out of the country. I've had times when I've gone to Southeast Asia, 4 times in a year, so I've spent, months away from Australia. So, I don't have an issue with the capacity. I don't need to basically merge to pay for that. I've got capacity from investments and other things, so I don't have that issue. But in terms of, the time that I spend and stuff like that, yep, at some stage, you're spending the time and you're investing the time, you basically want something out of it. I don't think anybody does anything for, they would do it for some, I was more motivated for ulterior motives. But at the same time, that was when I was coming on to Bart's or doing a bit here or there. But to do something comprehensive and start building content and all that, obviously you want to do it because there's going to be something, you're going to get something out of it as well. We're just humans, It's a bad idea to microwave a hamster. Exactly. The brains explode. Very messy. Very messy. You should know better, let alone the microwave would probably be rendered useless, potentially, if it gets too damaged or, too soiled. But, can you imagine the amount of time it will take to clean the damn thing?
Doesn't sound fun.
No, it wouldn't be fun. Let's put it that way. There you go, kitty, hamster in a pie.
Jeez, she keeps pestering me about the camera. Oh my God.
Yes, she's persistent. She reminds me to come onto Discord more often, and she goes, "Oh, do you realize?" She also reminded me, "Do you realize you're a moderator? Why aren't you on there?" Sort of thing. I do occasionally pop in, very occasionally, but it's a matter of having the time, as well.
Yes.
Oh, look, I've got a few ideas, of certain types of merch. My sort of attitude is, if I'm going to do any carny type, if I was going to do any carny type stuff, it would be very much, like animated or sort of similar to cartoony type. Really, taking the piss out of things. It's sort of in my character. Sort of that would be the way I would basically go about. It would be on the funny side of things. There'd be nothing serious about it in my merch, I can tell you.
Maybe on the style of those old Looney Tunes shows.
Yeah, exactly. I actually enjoy that. I mean, I can actually sit and watch those sort of cartoons like the Roadrunner, or things like Daffy Duck and stuff like that. I could sit and watch that sort of crazy sort of, or the sort of the slapstick type comedy, like the Laurel and Hardy type tradition and all that. So, the rich tapestry side as well. There we go again. More ideas for Kitty on combining hamsters. So this is, what do you think? Could you design some good merch unique to Harry's channel? So that's for you, mate.
Yes, I mean, maybe sometime in the future. I can do stuff on my free time, and it's not really a problem. But it will be slow, though.
My sense of humor, which is a good thing as well. That helps. Yes, look, I mean, actually, like some of the stuff that Luke's already done, I find really funny. I sometimes just go to them and actually, check them out. Some of the nanomotor stuff as well, sort of like the Matrix sort of stuff. I just sometimes check it and I just get a laugh. I really enjoy it. So
I'm glad you like my creations, Harry.
I do. I've got a funny bone. I've always had a bit of a funny bone, and so I always see the humorous side of things. I don't take things too serious. Life's too short for that. I took things far too serious, and in the past when I was much younger and pushed myself continuously and tried to get up in sort of positions of influence and stuff like that, and you sometimes can lose yourself doing some of that sort of stuff, and that it didn't work out. In hindsight, at the time it was very painful, but in hindsight it sort of taught me a lesson to not take myself too serious in a lot of things, so probably much better in that regard, for me anyway.
That's some advice that I could take as well, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. So life's too short to take yourself too serious. Believe me. As people, we need to basically chill out, and sort of get out there in the sun, get out there in nature and all that. Enjoy our world. So we're just passing through. Enjoy it, and that's, I think, much better way of living. So bacon over 365. That's 365, which is the oven temperature, on parchment paper, cooking sheets for 25 minutes. Comes out perfect and crispy. I would agree with that because I've done something similar. And yes, nice way to actually cook bacon. And I actually, what I've done is those really long pieces of strips. So because you can't do them in a pan, but those long strips, just laying them down. And I've done also something else where I've put rosemary on them, and so the flavor of the rosemary has gone into the bacon, and it's basically become sort of crispy with a rosemary type flavor. That is really nice. And remember, rosemary is also low oxalate as well, so you don't have to really worry about that.
Well, now I just need to try this.
Okay, so what's this? Greek Mediterranean flavor. Yep. We could have a mitochondrial theme one as well. Well, we could have anything. That's true. Yes. I mean, I have to say I do like pork. It's one of my favorite meats. If I was on a desert island, they told me you can only have one sort of meat, and that's it, I'd pick pork. So I know other people would pick steaks. Yeah, fine, good for you. But I'd pick pork, big fatty pieces of pork. Oh, and the more fat on it, the better. Ring, ring, charge up those nanomotors. Yeah, look, things like that, especially you're moving all the different muscle groups, because it's just physical work, moving stuff around. So it makes a big difference. As I said, I don't like prolonged isolated muscle groups. I think that most people end up with injuries and certain dysmorphia or sort of dysmorphia in the muscle skeletal structure. And I think that in the long run creates problems for people. You take a look at most big athletes that do a lot of this sort of stuff, they end up in middle-aged complete wrecks. So where you see other people into their old age that have done physical work, not an issue. So I think you've got the right idea. Is that a new dietary thing, Bart? Skunk, rather than hamster? That'd be interesting. That would be very smelly.
Yes.
Bloody hell. You'd have to throw away the microwave after that. Bloody hell, exactly. So, if you get free time, pop over to Bart's channel and help bash up those vegan trolls. Oh, we got another infestation of trolls, have we? He's on a catabolic. He's on a extreme catabolic diet. So, and basically he does an exercise that is very catabolic. Also, he may also be a TOFI, potentially. We don't know. There's a lot of things we don't know why certain people are and all that. You take a look, you can have two vegetards on exactly eating the same stuff in a household, and I've seen it online, one getting fat and the other one leaning out. Different genetics, a lot of different factors, that are at play. So it's, it's hard to say except all the actual reasons. But if you're on a very low fat diet that I believe he's on, and you're also using a lot of that energy from a lot of doing a lot of sprinting and a lot of a lot of endurance riding and stuff like that, you basically you can lean out. But even Walter Kempler, that actually did these experiments back in the 30s and showed high sugar, very low fat. We're talking about 4% and 4%, and 2 gram, a couple of grams of fat and a couple of grams of protein and 94% sugar, and these people lost a lot of weight. You weren't engaging these people would have basically, they weren't actually mixing their macros, engaging the Randall cycle in any big way. And when you're actually eating like this way, even the sort of ratio, when you're looking at the ratio of glucagon to insulin, would have been quite low compared to a standard diet. So you're not fattening up; you're just burning away all this energy. And so, yeah, you can lose weight, but it's very unhealthy, very catabolic. It's a very unhealthy diet. It doesn't have enough micronutrients. So you become deficient. You get a lot of deficiencies and a lot of things that start not working properly in your body long term. That's why he's lost his hair and he wears a toupee, and he's got other issues that he sort of hides from the people, from the public. So that's how he operates. But he's that's his style. Plus, in order to maintain his muscle mass so he doesn't really deteriorate really badly, he also uses steroids, and he's actually admitted it. When he was actually arguing with Bart in a debate, he actually admitted it. So it's not something that I'm basically saying. He actually was, on Drew Moore's sort of site where the actual debate happened. You can go and take a look at it, and he basically admitted that he was taking steroids. So, a lot of them do in order to maintain muscle mass, because they can't do it any other way on that deficient diet. So, it's just that's the reality. If you go very low fat or very low carb, you will get fat loss. That's what the literature shows. You're not engaging the Randle cycle. You're basically specializing in one fuel or the other. The difference is that the other, you'll be much healthier, because fat has fat-soluble vitamins that are very important for regulating collagen within your body. So you don't end up a wreck in the long run on that sort of diet. So that's the difference. You can pick which way you want to go. You'll lose weight on both. Don't get me wrong. You'll lose weight on both if you do one or the other. But the question is, how healthy will you be at the end overall? So, and I did a recent chat with Pim, and actually went over Walter's sort of approach. This is pre-Randle approach to nutrition and the successes he was getting. So people can go and take a look at that. So we won't, because that would take far too long to discuss all the way. But that sort of explains the sort of style that Durian Rider does. And the reason why he also basically does more like, even though he attributes the style to Ansel Keys, it's not Ansel Keys that came up with that specific style of that dietary approach. It was basically Walter Kempner. So he was the one that actually originated this sort of diet. It wasn't Ansel Keys. Ansel Keys used it for his research, because basically he was aware that in Europe there was, because of in most of the occupied areas, there was a collapse in the food supply. There was basically, the only thing you could get out over there quickly to these populations was seed oils and grains. You weren't able to get enough meat and all that. So he did these low protein, low fat, high carbohydrate type diets in his experiments. One, undernourished, in an undernourished state, which is what the conscientious objectors did. And they literally went funny in their head within a couple of months. They really went off the rails and became they lost so much tissue that they basically looked emaciated, like you would get with people in the Horn of Africa that were starving, that sort of look. He added back carbs. It sort of resolved that because they were getting enough energy. And as a consequence, the body wasn't ripping away any more muscle tissue. So you had this, because of the low protein thing, you end up with this sort of unusual, sort of similar low, sort of a sparing of protein. So you don't, because you've got shitloads of energy. And that's what he does. He just puts down all that energy, because otherwise, there's more energy in fat than actually, so you need less compared to sugar. So, he needs to get his energy from some, otherwise he will lose more muscle mass. So that's his approach, and it does work. Don't get me wrong, but it's not a very healthy way of living long term. Even Walter understood that. He knew that it was catabolic. He had to basically, because of the high insulin levels, he basically had to provide these people with very low sodium levels. So these people put on a very low, not only sodium, but potassium, everything, low electrolyte sort of diet, because you're retaining so much fluid because of the high insulin that if you've got a lot of these electrolytes in there, it'll actually increase even further the blood pressure issues and all that. And he was dealing with a specific type of kidney disease. So yeah, it's a therapeutic approach and nothing to do with basically. But now that we know more about the Randall cycle, now that we know more about the low carb approach, a keto style diet can do exactly the same thing. And that's what Jason Fung has been using, a sort of a keto fasting approach and getting the same results. Because at the end of the day, you want to not engage the Randall cycle. You want to basically lower this sort of this resistance at the cell level and allow the body to start healing and functioning properly. So that's what is basically happening there. And but at the same time, he's damaging his pancreas in the long run. From this carb loading, he will end up like Professor Noakes, from South Africa, that basically literally damaged from the carb loading, damaged his pancreas. So in the end, this isn't a long-term diet. He will suffer the consequences of that lifestyle. So, it's just a matter of time, when it will happen. Because you're not doing a mixed macro diet, it takes longer than basically on a mixed diet, like the standard diet that actually you get pathology happening much quicker. That's the only difference, So, yep.
Harry, I don't know if you noticed, but people on the chat are having a lot of fun because this Richard Jones guy, he's an alternate account for Durian Rider.
Yeah, look, there's different characters out there, but Harley's one of the. Yeah, I agree with Bart. He's an absolute fucking dickhead. He's an absolute fucking dickhead because basically he has absolutely no respect for people, no respect for anyone. Yeah, so not a very pleasant character in that regard.
Well, I guess it's my time to go. It's
okay.
Yeah, it's late over here. Right? I don't want to keep talking and wake up my parents by accident. Thanks. I'm honored to be on, and I guess I'll be on sometime in the future, and probably with a webcam.
Yeah, look, go on to Bart's, go on to Pim's, come on to mine. I'm easygoing, get a bit of a feel for it, and at the same time, I think, has Necro Kitty been helping you with your English as well, hasn't she?
Yeah, she has, and I've been talking a lot more lately, and it's also good for me because a ton of companies, they actually test you on your conversation in English and stuff.
Okay.
So yeah, it's good for my professional endeavors, so to speak.
Yeah, development. Yeah, look, exactly. So I hope we're a friendly crowd, as you know. So, come on, have a bit of a chat with us, have a bit of an amusing time, as you can see. Yeah. So thanks for coming on. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome, Red.
Hopefully, I'll see you on next week as well, or on Bart's or Pim's channel.
Yes, probably so. For now, I'll just be here watching. I just don't wanna risk waking up my folks,
Not a problem. Thanks for being on, and take care. Okay.
You as well. Take care.
See ya. Okay, so back to me, lonely me. Where's Jared? Still hasn't turned up. He must have been caught across the borders at border crossing. Yep. Oops. Okay, so I just overshot again. Damn StreamYard. Yep. Potentially, who knows? No, look, I do appreciate Luke coming on. Yep. We've got it in those nanomotors. Yeah, the gangster one. Yeah, that's a really good one as well. Yeah, I've sort of enjoyed a lot of that sort of stuff myself. Harry, your lips just didn't fit. Just like many of us here. Yeah. I'd like to see people who have had heart issues find out about your channel and listen to your journey, your research, actions. Yep. Look, that was the initial motivation for me to come on for that reason. So to sort of tell my story, what I've done to improve my cardiovascular health, the mistakes that I made, just going through all the sort of motions. But unfortunately, it has the majority of crowd. I think I've only had one or two people with specific cardiovascular issues. And I haven't actually seen them around for some time. So, one of them does appear, one of them sort of for reasons over EMFs and other things became very hostile towards me and unsubscribed because they had differing opinions on that sort of stuff. Fair enough, so had a few people like that turned their back on me. That's fine, I'm not going to compromise my own scientific integrity and stuff like that just to keep one or two people happy. It's just the way it is. So yeah, look, hopefully more people will turn up in the future. We'll see. Don't know. Yeah, you should. Yeah, it gives it a really nice. But the thing is, what I actually did as well is I actually put them into a bowl with the rosemary and just left it in the fridge for a while. So it sort of ended up permeating and getting the flavor inside, because it's not so much the rosemary you want the flavor more of it, which is a thing. Let me just go through some of this. Oh, okay. Is that who it is? Okay, fair enough. I didn't realize who the person was. Yeah, look, they want to come on here and challenge me. They can. I'll send them a link and they can actually argue their point. I don't get intimidated by cocksuckers like that. I'm happy that you're finding it interesting. Yeah, look, I'm always polite to answer any questions, but if people talk shit or unscientific garbage, I'll point it out to them. In that regard, I won't shy away. The reality is that diets like that, there's not one or half or whatever. If you take a look at any woman that goes on basically on that diet actually loses her periods. And you've got freely saying, "Oh, that's okay." I'm going, not enough cholesterol in the diet. Basically, the body will prioritize other things, important functions, brain function, heart function, other things. Reproduction in an environment where there's not enough micronutrients to support it, or protein to basically, provide the level of, when you transcript enzymes to do a whole lot of things, you need more protein. You don't have those things, the body will deprioritize certain things in that regard. But they think it's, okay, because they basically believe in, like if you listen to McGregor, you're talking about castrating people and, and we're overpopulating. So for them, it fits their narrative anyway, that sort of nonsense. And that's how they sort of, on the one hand, they talk about the science, which is the nonsense science, all the epidemiological garbage, which is basically questionnaire garbage. There's no causal statistical inference you can even make from that. It fails the Bradford Hill criteria, so in a whole lot of ways. And so, when you argue these points with these people, they run away, but they'll sit around and talk their garbage, and they never cease to amaze me. So, oops, my best friend eats so much carbs and fat, but he can't gain fat whenever he does. I'm sure it's hyperthyroid or something. He has a lot of muscle, but his body fat is so low. But if you've got a lot of muscle, and you're doing a lot of because to maintain a lot of muscle, he must be doing a lot of physical work. And if you've got a lot of doing a lot of physical work, you're probably repleting a lot of that carbs as glycogen. So, he just may be at the very low grade of the Randall cycle, or even just slightly below it, which means that he's using all that energy. And if he's using all that energy, not an issue. But if it was a couch potato who had very little muscle mass, doing the same thing, he'd balloon into a fat slob, so it's simple as that. That's the difference. So it's people that have got a lot of muscle mass, you require a lot of energy to maintain those muscles, and those muscles, when they're being worked, will use a lot of energy. So, physically active people, my father was on a mixed diet when he was basically a Boilermaker welder, and he was quite lean, big, muscular and all that. But when we got into the small business, his diet really didn't change much in that regard, but he started putting on weight because he wasn't as physically active and stuff like that. And his muscles started atrophying a bit as well. So, as I said, I've talked historically about different populations around the world, how when Southeast Asians are eating rice and certain other things, they were doing a lot of physical work. Now they're in offices eating the same stuff and slightly more, and they're getting fat, obese, and diabetic. So basically, when you can't do these sort of long distance endurance type activities, and you usually notice as these people age and get older, these cyclists or whatever, they start packing on the weight. They just start packing on the weight because they can't, basically their joints are fucked and they just can't do the same amount of physical work. So if they keep on the same diet, they're going to be in trouble. So, it's only a matter of time for a lot of these people to fall apart one way or another. So, and a lot of those studies that were done on low-fat diets were done in the past when people were quite physically active as well. People today are far more sedentary. So, and a lot of people are fat and they do low-fat diets. So, and if you look at the A to Z study that was done by Christopher Gartner, who was a plant-based academic, and showed that in his randomized control study that out of Stanford, this guy is, that it's superior in terms of weight loss. There were still some people that were getting weight loss on low-fat diets, but there was also people that were gaining weight on low-fat diets, substantial amount. So, it depends a lot on genetics, physical activity, a lot of things, how much energy is being utilized and taken out of circulation. So it doesn't basically cause, too much resistance, so it's depends on a lot of things. From my experience, people with either hyper or hyperthyroidism tend to have much higher weight problems, generally speaking. There are exceptions, and this guy may be an exception if he does have that sort of condition. But from my experience of people that I know that have approached me and told me they had hyperthyroid, they also had some weight issues as well. So I can't say that this person has got this because, I don't know. But there can be exceptions to that rule, especially when people are very muscular. They've got, they're physically very active and all that. They can mitigate a lot of that sort of stuff, so yeah. I would have to know more before I could really. Thanks, guys. The coffee does help, or waking me up a bit. Sort of now that I've got going, I've sort of picked up. I've sort of come out of that haze. You come out from early when you just wake up. You're in that haze type thing. Sort of, I yawned a bit and all that sort of stuff, but I'm sort of a bit better now, a bit more alive. Yep. Exactly, honest. That's why we love you. Good to hear, mate. Good to hear. Yes. We're a funny little crowd here. God. My kids are stupidly lean too. I make them drink banana milkshakes all the time. That at that age, I mean, yeah, you're so physically active. As long as you're keeping that the circulating nutrients lower. That would be messy in a microwave. Very hard to fit him in. Let alone it smell too much. Old meat, really. I wouldn't even feed him to a lion, basically. I wouldn't feed him to a lion. Probably make the lion sick. Oh, thanks, honest. Thanks, mate. I used to be quite a big one when I was younger, in my mischievous days. Yep, he definitely has fake hair, fake teeth, takes steroids. Makes you wonder if he's also a fake vegan. Vegan. Yeah, probably. Who knows? I wouldn't trust people like that. He puts up shows, and stuff like that, or the incident that happened in Adelaide that everybody was talking about and it was staged, you know, because there was not even a legal thing that it came out of it. So yeah, he's definitely a dodgy character. Let's put it that way. Trolling my Tasmanian carnivore uncle usually doesn't work because he will end up stuck in a depth lecture. Yep. Yes. He would struggle very quickly because he's only got pseudo stupid science to go to, nothing else, you know, absolutely crap. So it doesn't take much to rip apart any argument, you know. You just have to look at it. What is it? And I can show examples of very high clinical stuff that contradicts it, basically blows it out of the water, let alone what are the percentages? A couple of percentages. It's statistical noise in epidemiology. It is crap on crap. Holy shit, exactly. Who got nuked? Huh? Thanks, mate. Yeah, I'm sort of moving through, trying to catch up, trying to find a couple of questions to get back into the mood. What was this? Harley is so fucking stupid. He promotes McDougall and Gregor. Yep. Have people seen McDougall recently? Fucking off. He's absolutely, you know, gone away with the fairies. He's really lost the plot, you know. Gregor at least cheats, you know. Gregor cheats. He's a con artist. He cheats. He takes basically injectables, all sorts of stuff. He basically tries to cover himself with all this sort of stuff. It's a bit like Joel Con, you know, or Mr. Dr. Con, that, you know, sprays himself, injects himself, does all this sort of stuff. Most of the vegan doctors cheat, and that's why they supplement themselves to hell. McDougall, on the other hand, is one of those, you know, he tries to limit the amount of, you know, he tries to do it more dietary and less. He also uses some stuff, but he doesn't use like the others, and that is why he's really going off the rails really quickly. You know, I think at some stage they're going to commit him. It'll only be a matter of time. I didn't swear here for Harry's sake, but swearing and making me want to as well. Oh, bloody hell. I'm so easily led. Are you? That leaves a lot of possibilities open for a lot of the rest of us. Do you realise that, Zach? On this channel, we always like to easily lead people down a certain garden path of mischievous humour. So just consider yourself lucky that, and you should be telling this sort of crowd. I mean, this crowd is dangerous, mate. You know, you're really setting yourself up, to be really led, especially by Necro Kitty and people like that. Shell, yeah, dangerous women, believe me. Yeah, see, mate, it was pretty good to get him on. You know, he sent me an email and I said, yeah, please, so I'd asked him a previous time to come on, and then he sort of, and as I said to him, I said, you don't have to show yourself, because he's where he is, he's with a whole lot of other people around, and he sort of feels uncomfortable sort of including them on the video stream as well. So basically, you can do an audio. You don't have to basically show your face and all your other relatives behind you and feel uncomfortable about the situation. So I said, we're easy, we'll work towards that sort of direction over time. Maybe we'll get him to move his equipment outside the house. we can get a nice tropical background. Yeah, why not? I'll send you. Hold on. I should have noticed that. Somebody. Definitely come on, mate. I just sent you an email, an invite. You're welcome, mate. No, don't worry. You know, the more you get involved and interact with other people and all that in English, you know, the better your English will become over time. So I think this crowd understands that, and we all appreciate you coming on. Who was this? John Meadows had a heart scare this past week. Who's John Meadows? Do not know the character. Bodybuilder. Okay. Yep. Yeah, look, I always worry with the sort of things that bodybuilders and people like that put into their bodies. So yeah, so it's tend to worry the sort of crap that ends up in their diet. So yeah, it's look, the traditional old bodybuilder sort of culture was very different. You know, people just didn't do the sort of stuff that people do nowadays, and they had certain types of approaches to building muscle. So they would use a lot of things like, and I've actually shown on one of my streams. I actually showed the sort of the egg combination, egg and milk combo that they actually did with cream, milk, and all that to really create this really strong anabolic effect and sort of push up and provide enough nutrients for long enough for that muscle protein synthesis. As I said, with whey, you get a big spike, but you don't get this long period of muscle protein synthesis. And it seems like things like casein, or with milk products, you tend to have more casein, and you tend to also with eggs and stuff like that, you tend to have more the sort of long-lasting type, and you actually get more muscle protein synthesis because of that combo for a longer period of time. It's sustained. Where the way a lot of people do it nowadays, they get this much shorter period of muscle protein synthesis. So I think the old approaches are much better. But the way a lot of people mitigate that nowadays is they take certain nutraceuticals that enhance muscle protein synthesis, or steroids, or things like that. And they can create issues, you know. Then there's another thing with some people that have genetics with the myostatin sort of gene. So if basically it's not suppressed enough genetically, you can actually get too much growth. And that growth also can be in your muscle as well of your heart. So that can create issues as well, people that have got those genetics. So we don't really know about this bodybuilder enough to basically say, is it, you know, some of these genetics that may be playing a role, some stuff that he's taken that he shouldn't have taken, some of his dietary approaches. I don't know enough about the person to really comment specifically, but there could be a range of reasons and issues that could be at play. So, unless I know enough about the character, I don't make but any specific comment, but I'll just give you a general sort of idea of the things that can basically affect these people. So I will make some sort of vid. It'll just be a very short vid, just showing exactly this sort of supplemental or thing that they used to consume. People like Arnold Schwarzenegger and all these sort of big bodybuilders back in the old days, in 60s, 70s, and 80s, in that period of time before a lot of the sort of modern day drugs and whatever else came out and now permeate that whole field. It's a very strange sort of environment. I mean, people that probably have been in it probably know more. But as an outside observer, I don't think it's as healthy as the old bodybuilders used to be. There's too much crap that's being used by a lot of these people to try and get a bit of an advantage over somebody else. And I don't think it's a smart thing to do. So what's Negro Kitty saying? When I first went raw food, I actually got my period back. Didn't last, but it happened. That brainwashed me. I do now on carnivore. I have my periods back again. Yeah. So you did it for a period and then you sort of switched, So yeah, look, that can happen, sort of hormonal changes. But if you're basically on a carnivore diet or have sufficient good nutrition, you will maintain good levels of your period functioning in that regard. You also can lose your periods in a very low therapeutic type ketogenic diet as well. So it's not only on a sort of on the sort of the vegetarian type diets, but also when you do those therapeutic things, which I can't understand why people do, chase ketones for what bloody reason. Unless you've got epilepsy, you've got a clear neurological issue that you're trying to resolve and deal with, there's no need for most people to be doing things like that. So yeah, it's just to point that out to my keto friends. So you really need to get enough nutrition. Your body needs it, basically, in order to function properly, to do things. It basically needs good enough levels of protein. Protein is important, and basically the micronutrients that provide all the cofactors for all the enzymatic processes that are happening in your body that need to happen to basically maintain good health and longevity, basically. So, mate, I've sent you a link. Still waiting for you. You're still. What's this? He worked out 3 times a week and was a part-time retail job. Is this we're talking about this guy? I think. Oh, somebody else. Sorry, must be somebody else. I've missed the train of that sort of conversation. Okay, I'll try and find an extra question. More fat, more meat. Yeah. Me too, says Honest. So, think that I'm the younger sister. Laugh out loud. Pisses my little sis off. Something terrible. Okay. Now we know. So don't treat her as a young child. Is that what you're telling us? I'm glad for that, you know. I think the carnivore diet had something to do with it as well, making you a bit more youthful, you know. As people know, I'm 54, but, you know, I don't necessarily look entirely my age. But, you know, now the immaturity issue, you know, I sort of suffer from that as well a bit, tiny bit. You heard it here. Harry is not a coral basket type to his enemies. I try to wear them down. You know, with niceness. It sort of they run away, scared about niceness. Sort of works. Depends on the person. Here, skunks, predators, fox and owls. Not microwave ovens. Well, the skunks really got a good running today. So who has worse body odor, vegans or meat eaters? There's no study for that. We have absolutely no study for that whatsoever. So we don't really know. And I think actually body bacteria has something more to do with it than actually what you eat in particular. So in that regard, yes, I don't think anybody's actually done any specific studies in that regard. And your pheromones and all that people have are basically more determined by, you know, not only what you eat, but your genetics. So your pheromones, you know, are going to be such that basically anybody that's genetically similar to you, you will be repulsed. So you don't actually breed with them and create humans which potentially could have genetic diseases. So in that regard, what you find attractive or what somebody else finds attractive depends on your genetics. So if you've got a twin sister or a twin brother and you're basically interacting with, you will have the same sort of repulsion or attraction to their body odor, depending on how differing. And so both twins will have the same because they have similar genetics. So, but if you're repulsed or not by somebody, it's more would depend by those different types of smells that are sort of signaling. And I'm not talking about somebody that hasn't washed for ages. I'm not talking about that, you know, God almighty in the modern world. You know, if you're not doing that, what's wrong with you? But I'm talking about just general pheromones that are coming, you know, the body odor that comes from, you know, that first sweat, so to speak. You know, certain people will find that repulsive and certain people won't. It's because the more genetic different they are, that's why you find your brothers or sisters sort of smells repulsive. So you don't breed with them and cause less than optimal human offspring. So anyway, that's a side issue. How did we get that from vegans and meat eaters? Harry went on a tangent. Fuck me. And why? Because Harry went on a tangent. Depends on the person and their genetic difference between you. We can guarantee between carnivores, there's going to be quite a lot of genetic difference, you know, because nobody else in our family is. So we're going to be definitely find ourselves with very different people. And so we won't have that problem. But I suspect if you have a sibling that is carnivore, I don't think you'll find their odor very attractive. You know, it's not supposed to be. You don't want to be breeding with them. That's why. Again, carny bias. That's what it is. It's carny bias. You know, I'm surprised we don't have a few vegans here sort of shouting out, that's carny bias. I'll do that for them. Fuck me. I wouldn't want to be a researcher. Now let me smell you. You'd go, oh no. God. Yeah. Oh yeah, the acetone. Yeah. When you do go initially into ketosis, that can be an issue. Yep. I remember that when I was in deep ketosis in the first time. Bloody hell. You know, even my friends used to say, fuck that. But then after, it took me about, what was it? Probably 2 months when my level of, you know, my ketone utilization had got really to a very good level. And at that stage, I no longer had that bad breath, that keto breath that you have in the early days, unfortunately, or the acetone coming out, being breathed out. Yeah, I remember that. That's one thing I sort of enjoy about the carnivore diet. You don't get that because you're always in that sort of, you're fat adapted and you're in that low grade, so you're not producing this massive amount of acetone or ketone production. So what's Luke saying? Oops, let me click back on that. Yes, I've heard carnivores don't really smell. Body odor becomes neutral. Probably no. Yeah, well, I don't think so. It depends on how closely you're related with that person and whether they've actually washed, how recently they've washed. What's this? Face it, meat eating women taste better than vegan women. Have we got a cannibal here? Where do you live? Or are you going around smelling people? You know that is very inappropriate. I'll leave that as a comment. That's true, Zombie. Mukbang, you're spot on. We don't fart. So in terms of those other bodily smells, we're definitely one ahead of the vegetards. Yes, I mean, I've heard a number of people that are around vegetarians or vegans and their farts and all that, and they think they're very funny, but the rest of us, nope. We basically very much dislike that shit that I'm talking about. And they usually have loose stuff as well. Yes, he is. He's part of the Vegan Spectre Society for the deranged. Like back of hand and sniff to smell oral odors. It's an option. It's an option. We could do that. I'm okay. I can actually smell the cream in the milk. Oh. As soon as I dropped carbs, I noticed that as well, Zombie. Yes, the gas. The gas, yes, exactly. Look, even when I was doing a lower protein, I did for about, what was it? I think it was out of the 6 months that I did like hardcore keto, there was about, I think, 2 months where I dropped my protein down to about 10%, and I actually upped my vegetables and stuff like that. And I can tell you that period, my farting went up as well. So even on a keto diet, if it's very vegetable heavy, or what, there are even vegetarian keto diets, and there are vegan versions of the keto diet as well. So yeah, I know. So they obviously, because of the high plant matter in the diet, you definitely, yes, you will push up that that gas level. Yes, it's yeah. I'm happy that that's not part of my lifestyle anymore, because I used to have some rippers. Like some days I'd just literally, just one after another. And I'm going, what the bloody hell is happening? Yes, I don't get that fun anymore. I'm not contributing to the greenhouse gases anymore. I really feel bad about that, because I know it annoys the veg tarts. This isn't what really gets me. They produce more than me, and then they point the finger at me. Yeah. Oh God, it's damn annoying, and I can't annoy them back. So Shells, my IBS stopped 2 days of no carbs. I'm not surprised. There was nothing going in the colon, or very little. So yeah, giving it a bit, and you're basically eating more meat, which would basically over time heal. You were getting in the fat soluble vitamins that basically regulate collagen, and all that sort of, and as well, the sort of, not only the actual colon itself, but also the muscle parts that actually work the electrical, because it has a lot of nerve endings to basically be able to push the sort of the feces out. So as a consequence of that, of having a high cholesterol diet with more nutrient density to basically support the proper functioning, your bowels would have operated much better, and over time would heal much better. So yeah, not surprised at all. Most people if you take a look at every single person that even the guy that does the gut stuff, that talks about reducing the acidity, eating more animal-based sort of diet and all that, even he's part of his protocol as well, shows similar results. Basically an animal-based diet will heal the gut, will provide the proteins that are required, will provide the nutrition. So, it's definitely the way to go. If I go dairy crazy, I get a lot of toxic gas. That can happen, if you've only got one allele, not two alleles of the lactase, tolerance sort of genes, then you may be okay to some level, but and at the same time also, the standard milk has had its cream taken off. When you take off the cream, you change the composition and you increase the carbohydrate content of that meal. So milk coming out of the actual animal itself will have much lower levels, and also will have all the enzymes and stuff like that. So, and unfortunately, a lot of the foods that we consume still have quite a bit of carbohydrate content in, and some people are more susceptible than others. Dairy and eggs seem to be for that, but that's also because of the high levels of basically sulfur as well. So that can play a role as well. So, I noticed when I was supplementing a bit more sulfur to resulfonate myself, because we lose a lot, especially from oxalate. Oxalate will deplete sulfur, and so as a consequence, I tended to basically, consume more to, get my levels up, and obviously I got a bit more flatulent because of that. So it can happen if you supplement in sulfur or eat a lot of sulfur-rich foods, even if they're animal foods. Yep, you can get a bit of gas. So yeah, we're not immune in that regard, but we'll still basically make fun of the vegetards because we like to make fun of them. I do it especially. And I know the rest of you do as well. Damn, we got a few questions here. God almighty. Now, let me flow through. There's a lot of conversations. Okay, so I was right about the genetic things. Yep. So, not look, it doesn't surprise me. Yep, exactly. Vince did. Yep, he was a monster of a man. Yeah. So one of the old bodybuilders. So a lot of them actually consumed a lot of eggs, and a lot of like cream, dairy. They combined it, and I will do a vid on the actual their actual smoothie that they used to make to basically consume, and they used to basically just consume it using a spoon. So it was, because it was quite thick, like a porridge type thing, but it was an animal based type protein, heavy protein type food with a lot of cream in it as well, and they used to consume that. They used to consume liver 3 times a week from memory, I think. So they used to pack in the nutrient density. There were no supplements back in those days, so you had to eat these foods to get the nutrient density in, and these guys knew it. Yep. Yeah, and exactly. And Arnie today just talks a whole bunch of BS, because basically he used all those techniques to build his fantastic physique back then. So he's just an absolute sellout, but doesn't surprise me. And what's that? Are you referring to hypertrophic cardio? Yeah, cardiomyopathy. Yeah, because that can happen to, especially with the genetics, the myostatin gene. So that's pretty much what happens with these people. So they're more susceptible. So when they start doing this sort of a very anabolic activity, they are far more susceptible. Usually, if people have it in a severe form, it's usually manifested in childhood. And you see these little kids that have got like bodybuilder muscles without really doing much exercise at all. So that's the sort of extreme version. Those people live. Some of them nowadays live into adulthood, but they use a number of supplements and medicines to suppress these sort of anabolic pathways, and they don't live as long in that regard. They do tend to be more susceptible to cardiovascular disease and heart attacks and stuff like that. So, but some people can have it at a lesser level and still get at risk. So, it's not only basically by having a bad diet and blocking your arteries you're going to cause that, but there can be genetic reasons as well. It's quite rare, but it does happen. So, some people just bad luck, situations, circumstances. Unfortunate. Definitely a legend. Sort of. Yeah, sort of. Yep. Obviously, when it's in the mountains, you will get, the problem is, UV light will actually deplete, but the actual body itself actually also has mechanisms that are far more efficient in depleting compared to UV. So it's not a license to, if you're in the tropics, it's not a license to consume sugar like there's no tomorrow, because even there people get diabetes, and that's my argument, where I agree with Bart that it's dietary that comes first, and not basically the sort of this light source that Jack Kruse talks about, that's more important. No, it's not. The light is important. It does deplete deuterium to some extent, but it's not as efficient as as keeping it out in the first place with the diet. So, and if you really want the best depleted water, would be to get it from plants, like especially like cactus. Water from cactus is very low in deuterium. And that's why, for instance, camels that eat cactus and get their new hydration from cactus and their fat from their hump, they actually are cancer-free. These animals basically live until cell division can no longer happen and they just die. But they don't really age like other animals. So they don't really show their age like other animals. They just get to a stage where, that's why Arabs have actually a saying, if you're going to go out in the desert on your own, don't go out, don't use a camel, go on a horse, because at least a horse, you can see how old it is. You can work out that it's old. And so you will get a young horse to go over a distance in the desert. With a camel, it's really hard to tell how young a camel is, or how old a camel is, because it's as I call camels deuterium depleting machines, because that's what they are. They have that hump, a lot of fat, where they get metabolic water from fat. So remember I explained this before, about 1 gram will give you 1.1 mils gram equivalent, so 10% more water, metabolic clean water that is deuterium depleted. And then, sugar will basically do the opposite, 0.44, which means that it dehydrates you. So sugar dehydrates, fat hydrates. So the camel can use, the cactus as a water source, which is depleted. So cactus would actually be a better, and a number of the other plants that the Kalahari Samburu Bushmen use, and they basically literally use these really thick leaves that have got a lot of fluids, and they actually press on them and actually slowly get it into a sort of a container, which is an ostrich egg. Not always, but there are, primarily it's an ostrich egg, but there have been other eggs from other sources that they've used to fill it, and they use that as a container for water. Traditionally, that's what they used before. Nowadays they buy plastic bottles and all sorts of things, but back then that's what they used, and they hydrated themselves. So plants that are depleted, the leaves that are thick leaves that have got a lot of fluids in them, that is the most depleted water that you could use if you really wanted to use that as a water source. Putting it out in the sun, yep, it helps, but it'll only probably knock out a very small amount. It'll still be relatively high. It'll be slightly lower than sugar, but it will still be higher than protein or fat. But, as long as you try to prioritize, and this is the whole reason why, if you want to live longer and you want to deplete more deuterium, you can't use sugar. Because the moment you use sugar in your diet, you're pushing up the Randall cycle, because you're mixing your macros and you're making yourself sick. So if you're going to go very, very low, 0 carbs, then you can slightly push up periodically that fat so you can get more cleaner metabolic water into your body. So you've got depleted deuterium water and you need less hydration. So what happens is your body itself will basically upregulate antidiuretic hormone genes, and these antidiuretic genes will basically mean you'll basically lose less fluid compared to other people. So you won't need to hydrate yourself to the same level with water. And if you're so that's what happens over time. It takes a while to adjust to that in that regard. But if you're jugging down a whole lot of water continuously, like high levels of hydration that a lot of people do, what you'll end up is, forcing the body to try and get rid of all that extra deuterium. Unfortunately, we don't have the sort of low deuterium environment our ancestors had once upon a time. They could drink river water, which was depleted to 135 parts per million. Now it's 155. So, it's very hard if you consume a lot of water and then sugar, some level of sugar, to get into that sweet spot of 120 parts per million. So you're really, if you want longevity, that's the reality. If you want longevity, you need to keep your nanomotors in good health, because you only have to look at old people that have done a lot of damage to the nanomotors, and they can hardly walk. They really, they've lost a lot of basically mitochondrial capacity to produce energy. And if you can't produce enough energy, you can't produce enough capacity to repair. If you can't repair, your cells become more senescent, more damaged over time. And the more cells become damaged, the more those organs that those cells are part of start failing in different ways. And you start aging from the inside out in different parts at different rates. And depending if it's a critical part, it may kill you quicker than a non-critical part. But even if it doesn't kill you, and the critical parts are better looked after generally by the body, you still basically will be, much weaker, not as energetic, not in a good state, so, general deterioration, will happen much faster than somebody else that keeps it cleaner. It's just the way it is. So, yeah, fat is your friend. Sugar isn't, for longevity and good health in that regard. But at the same time, people have concerns about, losing weight. Well, if you're losing weight, just use your stored fat. That's fine. You can still live off that. That's depleted in deuterium. And the nice thing about it is also the backbone of that, when it comes to the triglyceride, the glycerol, which is the sugar part, that basically has much lower deuterium levels than, exogenous, sugar coming from the outside. So in that regard, getting it via gluconeogenesis is much more healthier in terms of deuterium as well. So, it's all up rather than down in that regard. Anyway, so we're over the 3-hour threshold, unfortunately, and I have to keep it within that sort of thing, because my 20 hours because I did a 4-hour last time, and my 20 hours are sort of very tight, because we've got 5 weeks in this, 5 Sundays in this month. So I'm going to have to drop it there, unfortunately. What was this one? What about the demonic dark and drifting into Frankie's channel, seeing posted demonic voices? And yeah, look, he's lost the plot. He's really lost the plot. That's why I've unsubscribed. I've literally cut off all ties with Frank. I mean, he's really lost the plot. I don't know what's going through his head, but he's really gone into crackpottery on all levels. So, look, he's a great kid. I had great hopes for him, both for our community and for himself, but he's just really lost the plot big time. Yeah, look, yeah, exactly. Unfortunately, I hope he can come back to our community, and but yeah, see, he's definitely grown, because there's a bunch of crackpots out there that have jumped on that are not necessarily carnivores, but have jumped on his bandwagon as well, because he talks the same sort of shit, so yes, in that regard, sad dieters have the worst smell. Yeah, some of the stuff that they put down their gob is quite nasty. Let alone that there's a lot of that, because they have a lot of processed food, which is so heavy in all these emulsifiers and crap and stuff like that, and really is nasty stuff to be putting in your body, because it just causes so much gut permeability. There's a lot of studies that show some of these emulsifiers and all that damage the actual gut lining, and also those mucosal layers that protect. Like you've got mucosal layers here, those mucosal layers are vulnerable to be degraded by these emulsifiers. Really nasty stuff. You want to keep definitely away from that. You're welcome, mate. Hope to see you in the future as well. There's a video about making deuterium depleted water. Yeah, look, I know that there is stuff on. It's very expensive. It is absolutely very expensive, very costly. And the thing is, unless you've got a real clear medical reason where you've been tested to see what your levels are, and then use depleted deuterium water, you can actually buy it from Hungary. You can actually purchase it. So if you've got, I say to people, if you've got some ailment, I will do a little clip on it, and I'll actually point exactly where you can actually get tested and also where you can purchase it in that regard. So you can then go out and buy this sort of stuff. But you should always make sure with a physician, the people that would do the testing, they do provide, there's a network, they will provide support, and they will tell you, okay, your levels are here. We need to bring them down here. This is the deplete, because remember, you want to be in the sweet spot, that 120. You don't want to be below 2 catabolic or 2 anabolic, out of that range. You want to be in that sweet spot of 120. So that means that you want to basically not take the very low levels, because they have different levels from 25 parts per million right up to 125 or something like that, along those lines. So, and they cost different prices, because it is actually a factory that basically puts this water through and actually uses some sort of like an electrolysis type thing that actually is able to strip away the deuterium content and lower it. But you have to, depending on how much you want to deplete that water, you have to put it in a number of times more, depending. So the more times you put it through, obviously the more manufacturing cost, the more labor cost and all that. So the price goes up. So unless you need it for therapeutic reasons, I wouldn't recommend it. I think you're wasting your money. But if you basically have an underlying condition, you're really sick, you're cancer or something like that, and you need to deplete the deuterium out of your system, that because it's a growth factor, and you're coming from a very high level, yes, you may want to use something like that as a short-term solution to bring down those levels and basically, reduce this, the severity, and also I know there's a depleted deuterium water, DDW25 it's called, that this is I can't remember the actual name of it. It's a veterinary, for veterinary usages of dogs and cats and whatever else, animals that have got basically cancer, and it is actually registered by the European Union as a method to basically reverse cancer in dogs and cats and stuff like that. So it is being used and subscribed by veterinary physicians. So I say, if I've got something like that, treat me like a dog. Woof, woof. So, yes, in that regard, you're welcome, mate. Appreciate everyone here. And, we'll get stuck into it next week again. Yeah, so, at least the following month, we're down to basically 4 Sundays rather than 5 Sundays. It always, when I get these 5 Sunday ones, it's really, I have to try to minimize the amount of time that I spend on here. I can't even do my €2 ones live streams, because that, because of the extra sort of weekend, which is a bit of a hassle, but what can you do? It's just the way it is. Trying to keep the stuff down in that regard. Years ago, a crackpot claimed water had a memory, and treating with dysgouges had amazing health benefits. Look, science has moved on. A lot of people didn't realize what you could do to water to give it, because a lot of people were aware of the viscosity, the different viscosity of metabolic water around the mitochondria. So there was a bit of science there. And so that's the level, but they didn't understand, they didn't have the knowledge of the deuterium side of things. So once we understood the deuterium side of things, and this is what came out of science from the Soviet Union and Eastern Europeans that basically were doing research on this, and a lot of the Western science was unaware of it in these areas of light, magnetism, deuterium. So they were doing really hardcore stuff because they weren't motivated by profit. They were just basically getting funded by government to do any research they liked. So basic research. So it did make a big, big difference. And I've got another one of Luke's images, so I'll bring that up. We've got this one's really good. I love it, mate. I love it. I got him. Absolutely love it. Thanks. I appreciate that. That's a good one. Another one for my collection. Bloody hell. Getting better and better. Well, at least we've got Luke to entertain us. That's exactly right. Thanks, mate. Yes. I got the Roadrunner. Love it. Must be my carnivore diet. I can't think of anything else. Anyway, guys, thanks. Appreciate it. I better get going. We're nearly half past. Okay, thanks. See you next week. Take care. I appreciate your attendance and your support as always. Please like this video, share it with your friends, and please, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe, because it just makes it, not only worthwhile for me, but also your support helps me grow, get my message out there, and basically will help other people as well. And that's the whole reason I'm here. Well, that's my motivation anyway. Anyway, take care and see you guys next week.